Welcome to Unraveling Education, the podcast that's part storytelling, part information, and part whodunit. We'll be investigating the underlying issues harming the public education system and identifying the key players involved.
Hi there, I'm Danielle Ford, former school board trustee of the Clark County School District, which includes the fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. This episode is all about my experience with the absolute lawless tyrant, Jesus Jara, or Jesus Jara, he goes by both, and the evil and maniacal things that he did while he was superintendent of CCSD, the fifth largest school district in the country. Although this episode has a storytime feel, this is not a storytime episode. Those episodes are going in order through my 4-year term on the school board. And in those episodes, we are currently towards the end of my first year on the board, around the end of 2019. This episode chronicles Jesus Jara's employment before, during, and after my term on the board. It includes the chaos he purposely crafted and the destruction that he caused so that he could remain employed and continue to gain power of the district. By the end of this episode, you will understand the methods that he used to bribe those who could be bribed, threaten and punish the rest, force thousands of educators, staff, and admin to quit, bring student enrollment numbers down by 30,000, and more. These stories fully explain how Jara pathologically lied to everybody he could, was almost fired, and then rehired, threatened and sued the board multiple times, dodged getting a proper evaluation for almost 6 years, all while being constantly rewarded with contract extensions and raises, taking his final salary to over $400,000 a year, plus perks, qualifying him for the Nevada retirement system, and he received a lump sum payout of $250,000 when he resigned from the district without giving any notice. So settle in, we have a lot to cover in the Jesus Jara Chronicles. This episode is a linear accounting of stories, events, and closed session meetings that the public does not know about. It's all specifically related to Jesus Jara's deceptive and immoral acts and his power-hungry behaviors about his employment. It does not include the deceptive, immoral, and probably illegal things that he did for actual work in the school district. I will touch base on some things that happened during COVID, but only because those parts are relevant to the legal aspects that the Jara Chronicles are focused on. The full stories of the things around COVID and school shutdowns and reopening will be explained in future episodes. And those are all part of the larger Jara saga, which of course is part of the larger superintendent, puppets, and evil billionaires universe. And I'm taking this opportunity really quick to put on the record that I hereby claim sole ownership of the Jara Chronicles, licensing rights, and a 51% share in all future entertainment deals, which includes, but is not limited to, all evil billionaire universe merchandise and or family theme parks that emerge from it. So in future Storytime episodes, when I reference this, if I say something like, remember that shady thing that I told you in the Jara Chronicles, it'll mean this episode. To make sure that you don't miss those episodes, go ahead and take a second to click subscribe on YouTube and follow on the audio podcast platform of your choice. All right, if you are caught up on the Storytime episodes, then you know that sometimes I start off composed and cool as a cucumber, and then by the end of the episode, I am screaming and nearly jumping out of my chair. So, fair warning. If there was ever an episode where I could become completely unhinged, it is this one, and you will understand why very soon. This episode was extremely difficult to organize and format, and for me to go back to all of these events over and over and over, and it still does not even come close to covering everything. So if you enjoy the episode and you want to support further production of the show, you can help by making a donation at unravelingeducation.com/sponsor. Everything helps and is greatly appreciated. And of course, sharing the episode on your socials helps a lot too. We begin our tale about Jara in the early years, aka Jara's villain origin story. Quick warning, there is absolutely no way that I get through this entire episode without saying the F word at least 20 times. So prepare accordingly. I honestly have no idea how long this episode is going to be. I have ADHD. I am time blind. It will be long, but it's in a story form so that you can take it in chunks or you can just skip to the next story. Another thing, and yes, this episode has so many disclaimers. It took so long in general to put together, but when I was ready to film it, I got super sick. So I have not been sick in a very long time. And I legit think that reliving all of this and having to relive it in my brain to organize it all literally lowered my immune system and is the reason why I got sick. My voice was gone for over 2 weeks and it's still not as strong as it usually is. So please bear with me. Hey, it's Danielle from the end of the episode. Listen, shit got real, okay? I remember telling you that I would cuss 20 or 22 times. I don't remember. That was so long ago. Was that 4 hours ago? Was that 400 years ago? It's all kind of a blur. Anyway, take that number of cuss words that I gave you and times it by 10, and then that's still less times than I ended up cussing while explaining all this psychopathic shit that Jara and a handful of trustees did. You will understand why all the F-bombs, but you may not want your kids around for this one. So you have been warned, and good luck and Godspeed. All right, now for the prequel, early Jara employment. Now, I could go through Jara's pre-CCSD employment history, but I came across somebody else who explained it beautifully, so I'm going to let her tell it in a minute. Now, many people, including myself, consider Jara to be their arch nemesis. That makes sense. He has pissed off, screwed over, threatened, retaliated against, and harmed a lot of people. A person like that is bound to have many arch nemesises. Would that be arch nemini? But you really got to be a special kind of terrible for a teacher in a different state who has never met you or worked under you to learn about you through their research, officially declare you their nemesis, and then blast your entire background on TikTok. That doesn't just happen to anybody. So let's take a peek at what Teacher Pay with K on TikTok has to teach us about Jesus Jara, the early years.
Have you ever had an arch nemesis that you have never even met? Because I do, and his name is Jesus Jara. Jesus Jara moves to this country as a kid with his family from Venezuela, and he grows up in Miami-Dade. He talks a lot about how being an ELL student helped shape him into the educator he is today, but from what I can find, he doesn't ever really get into specifics about his experience or his childhood. He graduates from high school in 1993, goes on to get an associate's degree, and then ends up here at Barry University, where he graduates in 1996 with a degree in sports and exercise. Please note that there is nothing about a teaching cert mentioned here. He graduates from Barry and in June of 1996 gets a job as the head athletic trainer at South Dade Senior High School. He works here for 2 years until July 1998, and during this time he also starts at Nova Southeastern University, where he ends up getting his master's in science education. He finishes the master's in 2001, and is that where he gets the teaching cert? Maybe. After South Dade, he moves to Coral Gables Senior High School from July 1998 until 2001, and this is also in Miami-Dade. At this school, he lists his job titles as assistant athletic trainer, dean of students, and bilingual biology teacher. This is the only time he ever even mentions teaching experience, and I think it's important to note that the only references of him being a teacher are things that he has self-reported. It's on his resume and in his self-written bios. So do I think he was actually an assistant athletic trainer, a dean of students, and a fully fledged bilingual biology teacher? In my opinion, no. He maybe did push in language support for 1 or 2 classes so that he could say he had teaching experience. And why do I think that? Well, there's an article that of course I can't find right now where he says he didn't even think about pursuing admin until he was at his second school. All of a sudden he's at the second school considering admin, and he gets 3 years of questionable teaching experience that he will tout for the rest of his career, because this is it. This is the only teaching experience he will ever have. We are 5 years into this man's professional experience, and he is done with classroom experience. In the summer of 2001, he leaves Florida to move to Springfield, Massachusetts, to become an assistant principal of Van Sickle Middle School. At this point, you might be asking yourself, what made this man leave Miami, the only place he has ever lived besides Venezuela, and move 1,500 miles away to Massachusetts? for an assistant principal job at a middle school? Well, I asked myself the same question, and this is where we meet Joseph P. Burke. Burke became superintendent of Springfield Public Schools in 2001, and I will give you one guess where he was before that. Yeah, if you said Miami-Dade, you're right. He spent 27 years working in Miami-Dade County schools, and that's obviously where he met Jesus Jara. How they met, I don't know, but I can tell you that Jesus Jara has stated before that he considers this man to be his mentor. So who is his mentor? Well, in 2007, Burke speaks in front of the House Committee for Education, where he praises No Child Left Behind and also advocates for performance-based pay for teachers. So that's who his mentor is. Back to the story. Jesus Jara is an assistant principal at Van Sickle Middle School until February 2003, where he is promoted to principal of the Springfield High School of Science and Technology. At this point, the man has 3 years of questionable teaching experience and is already fast-tracked to admin. But he had also uprooted his life and his wife and maybe kids, I don't know when they were born, to move from Florida to Massachusetts to follow Burke. And these are the kind of men where that type of loyalty is rewarded. He works as a principal for 2.5 years, and during this time, he also starts his EDD at UMass Amherst, although he doesn't finish it until 2010. In either November or December of 2005, he leaves Springfield Public Schools and leaves public education totally. Start working at College Board. He becomes the senior educational manager at College Board in Waltham, Massachusetts, but he's only there for about 6 months before he packs up and moves back to Florida. At this point, we're only a decade into this man's professional experience, and he's already been an athletic trainer, a teacher, an assistant principal, a principal, and has now left education to work on the corporate side for College Board. In June 2006, he relocates his family again, this time back to Florida, when he becomes the executive director of College Board's Florida office. He's there until February 2010, and there's not much information about him during this time, but what I will say is he spends his entire career just being obsessed with AP classes. Why does he leave College Board and where does he go? Well, this time he becomes the Chief Operating Officer of Monroe County Schools, and if you don't know, Tallahassee's up here, Monroe County is Key West. I totally understand that some people have to relocate for jobs. This just feels excessive to me, but I don't know. Would you personally move hundreds of miles away for a job, and would you do it 3 times in less than 10 years? Seriously, let me know. Who lures him all the way down to Monroe County? None other than Joseph P. Burke, who had been superintendent of Springfield Public Schools, but left that position in June of 2008 when he was appointed to superintendent of Monroe County Schools. So in February of 2010, he brings his old buddy Jesus Jara in. Jara serves as COO in Monroe County Schools from February 2010 until June 2011, which is when Burke becomes the new superintendent of Lee County Schools, and Jara is appointed the superintendent of Monroe County Schools by then Governor Rick Scott. There are so many issues while Jesus Jara is in Monroe County, mostly around balancing their budget and how well he works with the teachers union, which is not well at all. He is only superintendent in Monroe County Schools for 1 year, from June 2011 to July 2012. And in that time, he applies to at least 5 different superintendent positions. And that's just what was made public. He has to reapply for the Monroe County superintendent position because he was appointed by the governor as technically like an interim superintendent, and the board now has the ability to pick their own superintendent. So in April of 2012, Jesus Jara is announced as one of the finalists for Monroe County superintendent, but he ultimately gets passed over for the job. During this time, he also applies for superintendent of Palm Beach County, also in Florida. And in February of 2012, he's announced as a finalist there, but ultimately again gets passed over for that job. And in May, he is announced as one of the finalists for Springfield Public School Superintendent back up in Massachusetts, and he gets passed over for that as well. He is also named as a semifinalist for the Santa Fe, New Mexico Public School Superintendent, and he gets passed over for that as well. At this point, he also obviously applies to Orange County Schools because in August of 2012, he gets hired there as a deputy superintendent. Even though Jesus Jara is my arch nemesis, I can have some empathy for the man. He took rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. So what do you do after that? You lay low, you lick your wounds, you plot out your next move. Starting in August 2012, Jesus Jara is now the deputy superintendent of Orange County Schools in Florida, which is basically Orlando. The superintendent at this time is Barbara Jenkins. There are seemingly no connections between Jesus Jara and Barbara Jenkins or anyone else at Orange County Public Schools, at least that I can find. So this might be the first public school position that he's getting based solely on merits. What I do know is that just a few years later, Jesus Jara and Barbara Jenkins will both be members of an organization called Chiefs for Change, which after just my initial research is giving off a lot of like TFA charter school kind of vibes, if you know what I mean. It's an organization full of a lot of high-powered education administrators, and of course their beliefs all sound really good, but it's just giving red flags. Anyway, as deputy superintendent, he oversees area superintendents in a couple different departments, and in 2013-2014, he seems to be in charge of replacing the entire district's curriculum to be fitting with Common Core state standards. But that's really all the details we get about him in Orange County. But don't think this man was content being just a deputy superintendent. He is still actively looking for his very own big boy superintendent job, and in 2015 he applies to the Palm Beach superintendent position for the second time. He ends up in their top 5 candidates, but ultimately gets passed over again. Anyway, in 2016, it is announced that he is also a finalist for the Metro Nashville superintendent position. Nashville conducts public candidate interviews, and I have to say a lot of what Jesus Jara says sounds good. He sounds like he wants to be a transformational leader. We know now that he obviously isn't able to execute on that, and also in almost every district where he ends up as a finalist for these superintendent roles, he ultimately gets passed over. So clearly most of these boards are liking him enough to bring him into the final stages. He sometimes ends up as the top 2 or top 3 candidates, but then they're either just not seeing enough to make them want him, or they're seeing something that they don't like. He's obviously unsuccessful in Nashville as well, and he stays on as deputy superintendent in Orange County Public Schools for 2 more years until 2018. To me, and this is just my opinion, it just seems like he is the type of man that is always on the hunt for the next bigger and better thing. He rarely stays in a job for more than 4 or 5 years, and when he does, it's not for lack of trying. Since 2011, he's applied to superintendent positions in Monroe County, Palm Beach County, Springfield, Massachusetts, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Orange County, Palm Beach County again, and Metro Nashville, and those are just the ones that we know about. In 2018, though, he is finally successful in his bid for a superintendent position, and this time it's in Clark County, Nevada. Now, in Jesus Jara's defense, it does seem like the Clark County School Board was pretty dysfunctional before he even showed up. I think that the board having these kinds of issues is what made it possible for him to finally sneak in and get a superintendent position. They just weren't able to look past their issues to see his issues.
All right, so that is the person who you're going to be learning about in this episode. As I mentioned in the episode Diary of a New Trustee, in 2018, I was in campaign mode, trying to win a seat on the school board when Jara was hired. I knew as much as the public did. I didn't have a strong opinion one way or the other. What we didn't know was that many people were warning the Clark County School Board about this person, including the Monroe County Teachers Union, who wrote, "To whom it may concern, I am writing this letter to express the concern that I have for your school district should you decide that Dr. Jesus Jara be hired to serve as a superintendent of schools for the Las Vegas, Nevada schools. During the time that Dr. Jara served as a superintendent of our schools, he proved to be inexperienced in his abilities to lead our schools. During his time here, we had a record number of grievances, over 20 in one school year, filed on behalf of our members, as Dr. Jara didn't require his administrators to understand nor adhere to the collective bargaining agreements that we had ratified and that the school board approved. Additionally, Dr. Jara served as the chief negotiator at our local bargaining sessions, and Dr. Jara imposed 7 furlough days on each and every Monroe County Schools employee and cut many positions, and continued to impose draconian cuts upon our employees for the following 2 years. We had to file 2 unfair labor practices on Monroe County School District during his time in our small county of about 8,000 students. He couldn't effectively manage a county of our small size. I have little confidence that he could manage one of your size. For the sake of your students and your employees, Dr. Jara is not the person to lead your schools to success. Sincerely, Holly Hummel Gorman." The school board ignored that letter. They did not even bother to reach out to them or anything. They did no due diligence. In the superintendent search episode with educator Robert Coles, we discussed the entire history of CCSD superintendents and the details of Jara's hiring, including the fact that the CCSD board had several decent superintendent candidates to select from, that did not come with terrifying warnings, but for some reason that didn't matter to the CCSD trustees at the time. The board ignored all of the information being presented. So let's watch how the hiring of Jesus Jara went down.
I doubt if, and I believe he likes to have his name pronounced Jara, not Hara as traditional would be, but Dr. Jara was the implementer of this, but I don't know. I don't know his feelings about this, but when several news agencies are reporting that the way Orange County and several other districts within Florida are dealing with their disproportionality is to farm these children to adult ed charters so that they are not dinged as dropouts. It concerns me. It concerns me a lot, especially with the relationship with Fordham and Broad, because they are making it very well known that we have all kinds of charter deserts and we really need to expand that. I got to tell you, public education is one of those things that if we don't hold it very dear, it is going to be the death of us as a nation. And I know that it was originally put in place to separate the wheat from the chaff and that, but the way that charters have been structured in this state is to make it very easy to take all the wheat and then put those children that have the most struggles in traditional public schools, but hold them very accountable with very limited resources. And I don't see an understanding of that when I had conversations or in the interview process. It did not seem to resonate with this particular individual, nor did they have a clear understanding of what that landscape looked like here. So individuals outside in our community that are very savvy to data, again, point to our district as having more growth than his. Significant, actually. So, not that they're not doing good things there, but I'm not sure they're doing better things than what we are. So, those are my concerns. I think that possibly for this particular candidate too, it's more important to find that big job.
I want to say we had an hour to interview them. We also met them in groups of 2 where we interviewed them again. They were also interviewed by the community, and I watched every single one of those interviews. Some of them I actually listened to twice while I was working. So I wholeheartedly agree that we obviously need to research these candidates thoroughly. I'm just wondering what you guys have been doing for the last week in between these interviews. I actually went through all the district's data. I went through the state data. I went through the legislative platforms. I called some people in the district. So I'm wondering what you did between the time that the candidates were announced and now, where you haven't been able to get a good feel of these candidates.
Thank you, Trustee.
I would love to let you know.
Okay. Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. I actually think waiting is a big mistake, and you'll lose the outside candidates, and we'll have to start all over again. I think waiting is a mistake, and I just can't support that. I think we need to make a decision today, and we need to decide on a candidate and get the contract negotiations started so that we can bring somebody here before the end of June.
For me, those things that I did have problems with and asked in our 20-minute speed dating round, the answers that I got didn't really answer my concerns. It was more of a brush off, and it's don't worry about that. And so that's of concern to me. This is a huge, huge process. I'm not talking about waiting. I'm talking about taking the time to do appropriate analysis and then synthesize the information and then come up with an evaluation that I can share with my constituents, my 265,000, not all of them have been involved with me, but 265,000 constituents who voted for me to be their voice. I don't just all of a sudden make that decision, that strong decision about who's going to be superintendent without at least getting back to them and having a dialogue. I think that's respectful.
Okay, so I get what you're saying. I guess I'm having a hard time finding the middle ground if you're starting all the way over here. And then I'm also wondering, how far in advance did you choose Mike Barton if you didn't have a chance to talk to your constituents after we had the interview process?
First of all, it's not for you to understand my process. It really isn't. What's to understand my process is the people I work with. And because you don't understand, that's one thing. You don't have to understand. But what I have to understand is how I relate to the people that I work with. And that's kind of where I'm going with that. I think this is too important a process. And I think Mr. Hudson said it maybe a couple meetings ago. I think you did. About this is too important a process to jam it so doggone fast. And so now we've got another process coming in, and you want me to make a decision up here on the dais because you don't understand. And I say this respectfully, and I say this very respectfully, I really don't care if you don't understand. I care about the people I represent, that they understand, because they are the ones that voted for me, not you.
Great. So that question about how far before the interview process did you and your constituents decide who was the best person for the job still stands.
And I don't think that's your question, and I don't think I have to respond to you on that. People knew Mike Barton way, even way before there was any discussion. And if that's what they wanted, they worked with him for the last 15 years. You probably weren't even here then. So if they had these kind of concerns, I listen to the voice of my constituents. And that you don't understand is really no concern to me. It's concerned what they think. So I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. That's great for culture.
Trustee Cavazos.
I think we need to move away from adversarial towards solution-oriented. I don't know if anybody else feels that way. Perhaps my 18 years of psychological training and mediator training is going to come in handy. We don't do this job because we get paid a lot of money, obviously. I didn't go into teaching because you get paid a lot of money. And I think right now we're getting off track with personal feelings, which is okay, because this is, as Dr. Young says, a very, very important decision. But we get accused a lot, and I accept it because I knew what I was getting into. I didn't think it was going to be this exciting, but I knew what I was getting into. So are we going to be derelict in our duties? We're accused all the times of being derelict in our duties and not getting the job done. I have received so many communications since last August of, why do you guys talk so much and not get anything done? Why is there only 3% of your time on the school board spent talking about student achievement? You spent more time talking about a 5-foot easement for a water pipe than you did talking about our kids. And I take that constructive criticism seriously. So I personally feel that we would be derelict in our duties and not moving forward here. Everybody is not going to get what they want. Now, I think that Dr. Young brings up a very good point, and as some of our community members have brought up, as far as was there enough time here? I would have liked to have had enough time, but we all sat up here when we had the community input and we listened to everybody about, we need to consider our internal candidates. We have some good internal candidates. We were surprised also that there weren't any internal candidates. So we listened to you. And we all sat up here and we voted on our schedule. And it was a very hard schedule for some of us to accommodate. I have a part-time counseling practice. I do pro bono work with veterans and with suicide survivors. and I had to scramble around to try to find other therapists. I had to cancel family outings, but this is what I signed up for. Willing to also look at Dr. Eva White. So that's all I have to say right now.
We could look alternatively at the next steps. You all want to shut that down, and that's what this agenda does say.
So I just want to, for the record, say that that was constructed by Miss Miller. So I'm just letting you know. Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. I concur with Trustee Cavazos. We should be trying to come together on this and move forward. So I'm going to say this. Dr. Haddad comes in second for me, but I really believe that Dr. Jara brings more experience. I was more impressed with his community meeting. I have a concern, frankly, with Dr. White because of some concerns from the community that I've heard.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. Trustee Brooks.
I'm going to second what Trustee Edwards says. I do not think that there is any benefit in postponing this. We actually do need to start negotiating. We need to start negotiating a contract. We need some overlap between the old superintendent and the new superintendent. So we just need to get to a place where we actually start talking about who people prefer as a candidate. That would be amazing if we could get there.
Trustee Garvey.
Because of reasons I've mentioned, I have some hesitation about being able to support either outside candidate. I could support Eva White. I believe she still could hit the ground running. I would hope that she would surround herself with a cabinet that will shore up some areas that she needs help with, as would any of the candidates. Otherwise, if that is not the case, then I definitely think we need to be able to allow those that would like to travel to do so and have time to talk to their constituencies about that.
Trustee Edwards.
I'm going to pass for now.
Thank you, Trustee Garvey.
So I'm going to have to leave, and I would ask this board if they would be willing to recess this meeting till 6 p.m. tonight. And that way all of us can continue the conversation. Otherwise, I am in a position where either the board will disenfranchise District B, or they will make arrangements to allow travel and come back for a final decision. So.
Garvey, are you going to join us on the phone while we want? Okay, thank you. Trustee Cavazos, back to you, or was okay. Trustee Edwards.
I sort of want to wait until Trustee Garvey's on the phone. I'm counting votes. I'm struggling a little. I feel pretty strongly that I think Dr. Jara is a good fit for our district and for the community. I think he has the experience that we need. He comes from a similar community as ours in quite a few ways. But I just don't know if there are the votes here to move forward with him. So I'll make a motion that we appoint Dr. Jara as our next superintendent. See where it goes.
Is there a second for that motion? Trustee Cavazos.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Trustee Garvey, was that you joining us on the phone?
Yes,
Okay. So did you hear the motion?
I believe it was to appoint Dr. Jara.
For yes, for superintendent. So,
Yes.
and the motion was made by Trustee Edwards, seconded by Trustee Cavazos. Trustee Young.
I'm going to abstain from the vote. I feel that what I requested in terms of the community that I represent, I feel you all just shut us down like you continue to do from this board perspective. So I don't want to vote against Dr. Jara because I need to have enough information. I'm at the level of a little bit more where I can get back to the community I represent and have a conversation, and I feel I'm being denied that and disrespected as a trustee and a community. Very much so. I'm offended.
Thank you, Trustee Young. Any other trustees want to weigh in before the vote? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to extend the contract negotiations to Jesus Jara. I keep forgetting which way he said. And okay, I'm just making sure that nobody's gonna. All right, trustees, cast your votes. Trustee Garvey.
No.
That motion passes 4 in favor, 2 against, and 1 abstention. Congratulations, Dr. Jara. We will have our legal team reach out to you and start contract negotiations. I hope that this community will please rally around the new superintendent and do everything we can to support him, to support our kids. Trustees, I'd like to move on.
This story is the Tarkanians' super choice. All right, well, the question stands, why was he hired? Of everybody they could have hired, why was everything ignored and the superintendent candidate basically forced through? Well, when I searched for the answer to this years later, I heard similar things from several credible sources. Now, I promised to share as much as I could with you, as much as I know and that I legally can, so that's what I'm going to do. But I cannot confirm that what I'm about to tell you is true. It is only hearsay. I'm just sharing with you what I heard. I haven't even wanted to go there yet because I was not involved in this point, and honestly, not my circus, not my monkeys. Okay, but here's the hot goss that I heard. I heard that Carolyn Edwards, the trustee whom I replaced and who influenced a majority of the board members at the time, was in her last year on the school board. She was termed out. She was in her 12th year, and she was thinking about her next move politically. Carolyn was considering running for Las Vegas City Council, so she started putting feelers out to see what kind of support she might have. She had a meeting with the Tarkanians. Amy Tarkanian told her that they would help her win that seat if she did one small thing for them. What does she have to do? She has to choose the search firm Ray & Associates to conduct a national search for superintendent candidates and then consult with them later on which superintendent candidate to hire once the firm had delivered their selections to the board. The candidates came back, and the Tarkanians determined that Jesus Jara was the best choice. Carolyn used her influence over the majority of the board to construct narratives about the other candidates. The community is pressuring too much for this internal candidate, and they're bullying the trustees. And then after stirring up all that drama and exhausting everybody, she quickly made a motion to hire a new superintendent, and the absolute disaster of a human that is Jesus Jara was given the keys to the 5th largest school district in America control of a multi-billion-dollar annual budget, and the educational decision-making powers for 326,000 students. What could go wrong? And Carolyn ended up not running for city council when her grandchild was born, and she moved. So if there was a deal made, then the other half of it fell through, which makes it hard to determine whether that is true or not. So November 2018, I win the election and I meet with Jara. I described that meeting in detail in the Diary of a New Trustee episode, which ended with me walking away thinking, like, who chose this guy? Someone must have determined that this is a very smart person, but I'm certainly not seeing it. But I guess it's out of my hands. This guy has a 3-year contract, so I'm going to make the best of it. In 2019, in January, myself and Irene Cepeda joined the school board. Right out the gate, Jara starts reorganizing everything without reason. He's taking actions that upsets the community. He's cutting millions of dollars from schools. He's bringing in multi-million-dollar contracts for testing and curriculum companies out of Florida. He's bringing his mentors to train and brainwash the board members. He's trying to change our governance model to one that gives him complete control and punishes trustees for questioning anything. We've covered all of this in episodes so far. I publicly opposed all of his bad initiatives and reckless spending. I called out conflicts of interest. I put as much as I could on the record. I was in constant public battles with Jara and the board members who blindly supported him. I tried at every turn to handle things out of the public eye, but that man and his minions made it impossible. So nearly every board meeting included some sort of a spectacle. By the end of my first year on the board, this narrative had been crafted of me being like this whiny, nagging, petty, confused woman who's constantly making Jara's job difficult for him, and she doesn't understand how anything works or her role in it. She's had it out for Jara since day one. It doesn't matter what he does. It'll never be enough for Trustee Ford because she just hates him. She hates him. That narrative was passed to political groups, community leaders, legislators, and reporters whose articles would never say anything like, Trustee Ford, who asked Jara publicly why he took $5.5 million out of school budgets without asking the board, or Trustee Ford, who continuously asked the board president why Jara's evaluation has not been scheduled yet. Nothing like that was ever reported, just one-liners. Trustee Ford, Jara's biggest critic on the board. Danielle Ford, the trustee notorious for being at odds with the superintendent. But at this point, most people, the public, had never watched a single board meeting, and most got all of their information about CCSD from the nightly news or local newspapers, including my family and friends, longtime acquaintances, people I went to high school with, and who I ran into the grocery store. They would say things like, oh, wow, you really hate that guy, or I hear you're causing quite a stir on the school board, like I'm the villain. And I was never offended by these statements, but I was curious, so I'd respond like, yeah, that's true, but do you know why? Which disagreement between Jara and I are you referring to? And then they couldn't name anything. I'd fill them in, and then they would go, oh, hell no. You keep letting him have it. The only reason I didn't lose my damn mind, honestly, was because of the people who were in the know and who paid close attention to board meetings and reference material, who would thank me for speaking up, tell me they support me, and ask me to please not stop holding Jara's feet to the fire. This narrative fizzled out, though, after the first year because my second year on the board was 2020, and everyone in Nevada began watching our board meetings. The local news stations would stream them live. Groups of people would hold virtual watch parties. They made school board bingo cards. They played drinking games based on board member behavior. It was like Thursday night entertainment ratings. Number 1 is CCSD's school board meeting, and then number 2 is Grey's Anatomy. And during that time, the narrative organically shifted with substantially more people being in the thanks for speaking up, please keep holding Jara's feet to the fire category than the bitter, mean lady category. Again, I'm not going to go into all of the horrendous things that Jara did during the COVID-19 pandemic and school shutdowns, distance learning, reopening yet. Later in this episode, you'll hear some of that, but they're just going to be highlights. Much of the COVID-19 chaos is intertwined with Jara's contract extensions, attempted terminations, and evaluations and lawsuits at the board. against the board and the extortion of taxpayer money. So I hope I'm making it clear that this episode is not about COVID-19. This is about Jesus Jara. Yes, both of them are viruses, but we're only focused on one of them at the moment. I worked to familiarize myself with Jara's employment contract. I reviewed it many times throughout 2019. I knew that it wouldn't be easy to fire him per the terms. It would take him doing something so bad that even his cheerleaders on the board could not ignore, and that was unlikely. His contract was set to terminate organically in 2021, so I made it my mission to ensure that the board didn't do anything to violate his contract, which could give him a reason to seek an extension. I felt like there was some sort of plan brewing between the majority of the board and Jara to get his contract renewed, and I was right. Let's really quick take a look at a few key parts of Jara's original employment contract, because this is going to be really helpful to understand as this story unfolds. So it opens with, the board has determined that Dr. Jara possesses the requisite experience, leadership, and management qualifications necessary to lead the Clark County School District. We already know that's a lie. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm going to only go to the parts that are important. Oh, and if you are listening on an audio platform, I'm going to present this in a way that you can totally understand it. But there are going to be a lot of visuals in this episode, so you may want to tune into the YouTube version. All right, his term of service. Let's get really clear on this, what this means. Why don't you read it through and tell me what you think this means? As I say it, let's just all understand what this means. You'll understand why I'm telling you to do this. Let's all get in our minds what this means, okay? Okay, so the term of this agreement shall commence on June 19th, 2018 and conclude on June 30th, 2021. Okay, do we understand what that means? It commences, it concludes. Okay, if the board determines that this agreement is not to be extended for an additional year beyond June 30th of each year, the board shall give written notice of the same to Dr. Jara no later than the last business day of February of each year. Okay, so if we don't want him to continue after 2021, we have to tell him before February, right? Or we could do nothing and keep him every year and year and year and year. Okay. If no notice is received, the contract is automatically renewed for an additional year under the same terms and conditions hereof, with the salary base pay to be reviewed annually, not to be less than the salary set forth, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're all good on that? Okay, so it's a 3-year contract, and if we do not notify him, it renews. That's pretty straightforward, right? Yeah, I thought so too. Salary, the district shall pay Dr. Jara a salary of $320,000 per year. So that is what his salary was at this point. He has some benefits. He gets money for a vehicle. He gets technology, he gets professional expenses, he gets to use district money to attend conferences, mostly with the Council of Great City Schools. He gets a wellness benefit of $5,000 each year. There was the Peloton scandal because he used that money for that. That was a whole thing. Now here we get to evaluation of performance. The board shall evaluate the performance of the district under Dr. Jara's administration at least once a year. Development of goals. The goals approved by the board shall be reduced to writing and shall be among the criteria on which the superintendent's performance will be reviewed and evaluated. The board shall evaluate and assess the performance of the superintendent in writing at a mutually agreed upon time, not later than December 15th of each year of this contract. It says the annual evaluation format and procedure shall be in accordance with the board's policies and state and federal law, and in consultation with the superintendent. In the event the board deems that the evaluation instrument, format, or procedure is to be modified by the board, the superintendent shall be provided a reasonable period of time to demonstrate such expected performance before being evaluated. Okay. Nothing in this contract prohibits or limits the board's ability to conduct formal or informal interim evaluations between annual performance evaluations regarding the performance of the superintendent as deemed by the board in its sole discretion to be necessary or helpful. So in a nutshell, he needs an evaluation by December 15th. We can do other evaluations in the meantime if we want to, and it has to follow our board policies and state law. Okay, now let's talk about termination of agreement. Okay, there's very clear ways that Jara could be fired. I got very clear on this. Termination by resignation, meaning he resigns, and it says that he can terminate the agreement by giving notice 90 days prior to it And in the event of such notice, he'll receive pay and benefits through the effective date of his termination. If he terminates before that, then he shall not be entitled to any benefit that accrues at the end of the term of his extension. Okay, so basically, he can tell us ahead of time, give 90 days. He can work in those 90 days, make that money. He doesn't get the rest of his contract paid to him. Those 90 days, I imagine, are put in there so that the board has time to get another superintendent in place. Termination for convenience by the board. The board may terminate this agreement by providing Dr. Jara with 30 days notice, written notice of the termination. In the event of such notice, this agreement shall be at the end of on that 30 day. He will be paid all salary and monetary equivalent of employee benefits owing to Dr. Jara, blah, 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 blah. What the termination for convenience by the board means is that for whatever reason the board wants to with a majority vote, the board can terminate Jara's contract and just say, thank you, we no longer would like you to be superintendent. Don't have to give a reason, don't have to put blame or have proof, just you're done. But he does get paid out the remainder of his contract. Then there's termination for cause. In the event of termination for cause, the board shall give Dr. Jara at least 30 days written notice prior to the date upon which Dr. Jara's employment will be terminated. He's entitled to all the same benefits, yada, yada. But there is only a few things that we can terminate him for cause, and a majority of the board would have to agree that this is something that he did wrong for cause. The first is failure to obtain and maintain certification. The second is the conviction of any felony or misdemeanor offense involving moral turpitude or relating to his employment as the district's superintendent of schools. 3, an act of omission constituting malfeasance or nonfeasance in office, whether or not criminal proceeding is instituted. 4, the neglect or refusal of Dr. Jara to discharge the substantial duties of his office for a period of 30 days. Let's all pay attention to that one. What does that say? That says if Dr. Jara doesn't perform his job and all of the duties for 30 days, that could be cause for termination. Willful refusal to follow a lawful order of the board, that's a good one. Habitual intoxication or abuse of drugs. Next is illness, rendering him unable to perform the duties, yada, yada. 8 is death. So those are the only ways that he can be terminated for cause. So I was new to the board. So many things were happening, mostly chaos caused by Jara. It was the middle of the year when it was brought to our attention through public comment that Jara's mid-year evaluation was due, which was in our superintendent evaluation policy. Now remember that Jara's contract says the board can and should discuss his performance with him regularly, that we can have a mid-year evaluation, and that he will follow our policies. So when that was noticed, we realized our policies say that he has a mid-year evaluation, and we're looking at each other oh my gosh. And here is what that looked like at the time. The 6 things in this circle is in our policies. So at the end of that same meeting, when someone brought that to our attention, during the trustee request period at the end of each meeting, which by the way, the CCSD board no longer has, I requested an item about his evaluation to be added to the next agenda. Several trustees agreed, yes, we need to do that. Let's get on that. But none of us should have had to bring that up. It is the board president's job, per the board's own policies, the president policy, to plan and schedule the superintendent's evaluation. And when asked Lola Brooks at the time why she didn't agendize his evaluation months ago, Lola gave a bunch of excuses. There's so much going on. She thought that there were more pressing matters to address. Plus, the board can never agree on anything anyway. Plus, how can she trust that an evaluation will be fair when some trustees are out to get him? Our attorney also should have taken the reins and said, this is a priority. I will confer with President Brooks and put it on the next agenda. But nope, she just sat there, doop, 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 doop. Just letting Lola ramble, who probably felt like she was in trouble because Jara did not look happy about it. No doubt this plan was to scoot right past that formative evaluation and later be able to say that he was never properly evaluated by his bosses or given the opportunity to, per his contract, to course correct any issues that we may have. So months pass and no mid-year evaluation has been agendized. I put it on the record a few times. I would like the record to reflect that Jara has not had a mid-year evaluation, which is not a fault of the board, it's a fault of the president. Around the end of 2019, Lola finally agendizes an evaluation, but it's just his year-end evaluation. I was not comfortable moving forward with this evaluation unless Jara verbalized on the record that he was okay without having a mid-year evaluation that was in our policies. And then he did that, so at least I was good with it because at least he couldn't say later that we didn't fulfill our end of the deal. So as we planned his evaluation, between coming up with this horrible rubric that I'll tell you about and having his eval, during a regular board meeting, Lola tells us that to use this new rubric, we're going to have to remove a few things that we don't use but are conflicting. And it's conflicting with getting the eval done by the 15th of December. Our attorney agrees with her. The long-term trustees seem fine with repealing these things. I'm just wanting to get any evaluation done at this point so that we don't violate that date in Jara's contract. There were no good options. We could keep fighting for like a better evaluation tool and risk violating his contract and giving him ammo against us, or we could use the tool that won't provide a fair evaluation for him and stay in compliance with his contract so that he can't say that we violated it later and try to get an extension. So I went with the second choice, and a lot of people were very upset with the board, especially principals who have to go through very thorough evaluations by Jara's staff and also thoroughly evaluate their teachers. And now Jara's evaluation looks like this. So really quick, I will mention these items in future episodes when we go deeper into the governance policy stuff, but I just want everyone to note that there were some things in our governance policies that Lola had us repeal, and I will refer to them later as the repealed. Now, the rubric, I'm using air quotes, measured absolutely nothing. It was garbage. It was so frustrating to get created, whatever. I understand why people were upset with it, but it is what it is. Okay, so leading up to this meeting, like I said, it was just horrible creating this rubric. I was just arguing about the metrics. It was terrible. You have to rate him 1 through 4, okay? It's either a 1, the superintendent does not adhere to the board's vision. 2, the superintendent adheres minimally to the board's vision. 3, the superintendent fully adheres to the board's vision, but it is not a central focus. Or 4, the superintendent fully adheres to the board's vision and it is central to everything they do. So nothing about like how the vision's going, results, nothing like that, just whether or not he's adhering to the vision. Okay. Then you have student success targets, developing and reporting on student outcomes. Okay. 1, and we're rating him on this. We either give him 1, 2, 3, or 4. 1, the superintendent has not created student success targets. 2, the superintendent has created student success targets, but the results are not monitored or reported consistently. 3, the superintendent has created student success targets and the results are presented to the board on a regular basis. 4, the superintendent has created student success targets, the results are presented to the board on a regular basis, and a process for ongoing monitoring has been established. So he's only getting, graded on whether or not he did the basic actual thing of like presenting information to the board and monitoring stuff. Nothing about the actual targets or if any goals were hit or anything literally at all. So there's many things like this core values, like whether or not the superintendent's actions or decisions are compatible with the district's core values, just 1 through 4. It was just wild. It was wild. Okay, so I had purchased the Balanced Governance book that nobody had given to me or mentioned, despite being shut down a million times by Lola saying, that's Balanced Governance, and this book was awesome. It was absolutely not how we were governing. I destroyed this thing with my highlighters. I made my own notes in my iPad, which is how I absorb information. There was a chapter about superintendent evaluations with a rubric that looked really good. So I'm like, why didn't we just model this rubric? Okay, Lola and Deanna Wright say that's just an example. I'm like, so what? It's a starting point. They let out exasperated sighs because I just don't get anything. So this was the process for that garbage rubric to score the superintendent. Okay, so I swear to you, we could only use evidence provided to the board specifically for evaluation purposes towards that rating. So that 1 through 4 rating that we were giving him, and the evidence for the board to use for Superintendent Jara's evaluation was curated for us by, are you ready for this? Superintendent Jara. You heard that right. Through numerous meetings about this, the Lindas and I tried many ways to get the board to be able to include our own evidence to evaluate Jara, but the majority of the board did not want that. So the process also included a self-evaluation of Superintendent Jara by Superintendent Jara using that same evidence. So all 7 trustees were given their own superintendent evaluation binder. which was produced by the superintendent's administrative staff who do his bidding and are absolute saints. It was essentially $50 to $100 of ink on paper in the form of presentations that not only were easily available to find online, but had already been printed for the individual trustees during the board meetings that they were from. Jara's evidence was literally just district updates from staff. And it was like so much paper. Okay, like I don't feel like you're understanding how big this binder was. But luckily for you, I still have it. This is real. This is the evidence. The evidence. Oh my God. Yeah, so we had like a couple days to go through, review this mounds of evidence, none of which was actually any evidence. Most of these pages are just full of ink for no reason. There is somebody out there who sells ink to school districts and loves CCSD. So then we all had individual meetings with Superintendent Jara that were about 90 minutes long, where he walked us through the evidence in the binder that we'd already seen in presentations and his reasons for his self-evaluation rating. Out of a 1 through 4, what do you think Jara scored himself at? Okay, 5 points if you can guess the rating that he gave himself. I'm sure that you got it. A solid 4, not a 3. Not a 3 with room for improvement or a 3.5 to show a little humility. A solid 4 in all areas across the board is how he rated himself. Okay, so next we were to take the evidence, think about Jara's self-evaluation rating, and then fill out our individual ratings on the rubric, which would be compiled into one single document later and then discussed at the official evaluation meeting. I refused to participate in this absolute sham of an evaluation the way Lola had designed it. I did not believe that we were evaluating on the correct things, and I was not going to play Lola's game. I knew we can't address anything during items unless it's included in the materials, so I noted on my submission why the metrics weren't fair, and I wrote a list of things that the board should be taking into consideration to evaluate Superintendent Jara on. Next comes the actual public meeting for Jara's official evaluation. Since Lola couldn't get the board under control, she invited the new NASB Executive Director, Deb Oliver, to walk us through it. Deb took us line by line, breaking each one apart word for word, to convince us that our ratings are supposed to evaluate only the agreed upon statements and then make us prove that our ratings met that criteria and then see if anyone wanted to change our scores. Lola chose to leave out my comments because it didn't follow the guidelines, but she left the comments that she liked to support his rating, like this one on page 16, class size. I don't know whose that is, but if I had to guess, it's Deanna Wright. I cannot even explain to you how terribly that meeting went. It was so confusing and nonsensical and over tedious for no reason. Deb's intent was to get us to come to a consensus on each single thing before moving on to the next one. That's cute. Like we can get to a consensus on anything ever. But we had to on every single line. It took over 3 hours to get through. We came to no consensus. Everyone agreed that the process wasn't good, and it just ended like, well, that's it. That was so awkward. The public could not believe that they were witnessing something operate that bad. We were all at the mercy of Lola and Deb Oliver, whom I believed at the time was trying to help, but in hindsight, I'm not so sure that she was.
Whether or not the superintendent created student success targets and presented them on a regular basis and a monitoring process has been established. That's what this is talking about. I'll take a moment and reflect on the rating that you provided. If there's a revision that you would like to make, now would be the time to do it.
Trustee Ford?
As you can see, there's some comments from me underneath the rubric. We don't have to go through all of them. I really just wanted them in the reference material, and just because these are what I included doesn't mean it's the only things I thought. I was really just like wanting to include anything that wasn't in the superintendent's evidence. So I had said that I think it's kind of silly to grade on whether or not targets were created. And if we're gonna do that, then we should start grading teachers like that. Like, you did great, you created targets, none of your students met them, but you kept me informed of the inefficiencies the entire year. Here is an A+. Just some things I wanted to note. I don't feel the superintendent supports the board specifically around some of our policies and practices that are very limiting. I think that sometimes he adds to the dysfunction of the board, favors individual trustees, and I have seen times of what seems like pitting board members against each other. For instance, telling one trustee something and later I find out that somebody else was told something else. And also falsely representing the positions of other board members on agenda items. When we have agenda items, we only meet one-on-one with the superintendents, and sometimes he'll say, so-and-so trustee is on board with this. There's been multiple accounts of making decisions and deals without prior board approval. I have seen him be dismissive or what appears to be vindictive towards anyone who speaks against him in his decisions. And I have never seen or heard the superintendent give a rationale around a decision, and it also can have him consider the morale of how it might impact the district, or any type of empathy, which just means thinking through how people might react to something and what their emotions might cause them to do.
Trustee Farr, I just want to know, we're not going to go through and read everything off of here. Are there specific points that you want to be added in a concise
I was not reading
manner?
the list. I was hopping around all of my green ones that match integrity. And then I also have purple, which matches communication. And a big one with communication is that we don't get options or any contingency plans if there was any opposition from the board. Sometimes we're presented with stuff and we have to approve it because there's no other plan B. And we don't have a lot of thought processes or, given to us when we're asked to approve stuff. And a lot of times we get agenda items and there has been important and relevant information withheld or the facts have been misconstrued. So with the stuff that is in here for measurements of growth, that's I think that my items would go into the exhibit portion or the evidence portion of it to kind of pair.
Keep in mind the evidence portion is in this binder right here.
What you are talking about right now. So there are things that, as you have been talking about things, there are things here in the evidence list that encapsulate those.
I guess this would be under governance / integrity / communication with board members, but there isn't any area in here for governance. But it would be maybe it could be struggles with having a cohesive relationship with board members or something.
I would disagree with that. I actually have a cohesive
That's fine, but a lot of these are not, we all agree on completely. Okay, let's not all pretend like the board is amazing. What's the word for whatever we are? Doesn't support
We're in
us.
growth mode.
Growth mode?
We're in growth
I like
mode.
it. Okay, level 1. I want to make note of it so that in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, we're not hey, it looks like the board superintendent relationship was thriving. Nothing in here, let's just put something in there to support the other recommendations for growth so that it makes sense to do them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So all these things that I put under the rubric, what's going to happen to them? Will it be somewhere in the backup docs of the official evaluation?
To the rating, then at that time you can add your comments and go through here as we just did the last one and add your rating to it at that time.
So then maintaining focus on student success, if for instance there were some political things that happened and I felt like student success was derailed for a period of time throughout the year, would that, those are two different things.
So in the evidence of a rating, so if I'll use the words you just used, something was derailed, then that would be
Okay.
You would say there was this, maybe you saw that in the evidence, but on your rationale is why you gave him that rating. And then you might also then put on there where you're going in the suggestions for measurable growth and improvement and make the suggestion there that everybody would then have the opportunity to to discuss.
Okay, then I'd like to get tagged back into this rating system, and I will add some thoughtful and
Good.
very balanced.
So with that, right now we're looking at the student success targets. The rating right now with 6 scores is a 3.5. And we'll look at the evidence for rating again. We'll go through item by item. Focus 2024, numerous Focus 2024 board presentations.
3.5.
I'm on page 5 of 22. Facilitated attendance of Harvard Business School training with Board of Trustees. Implementation of K9, I read it like a dog. Implementation of a K9 assessment so a common language can be developed at no cost to schools. Restructuring teacher and administrator evaluations. Large gains within the business operations side of CCSD as a result of the Council of Great City Schools Business Operations Review.
Hold on. Trustee Ford?
I have some comments, but I could probably wait till after we're through the rubric.
Okay. I'm going to turn you off again so that Deb can see when people are buzzed in to disagree with her.
Moving to suggestions for measurable growth and improvement. Build trust between trustees and the superintendent so that we can trust each other to not use such information in a negative manner to undermine decisions made by staff. Okay. Trustee Garvey?
So the build trust between trustees and superintendents so we can trust each other to not use such information in a negative manner to undermine decisions made by staff. What information is that, and how do we measure that? And I'm not sure that if this was my evaluation, I would know what is that suggestion for.
It's fine, we can scratch that. I actually wrote that, but we can scratch it.
Okay, and it might be something to add to our the board evaluation, because that really is the role of the board.
Right.
There's some stuff in the board evaluation that's similar.
Yeah, okay. So we'll scratch.
Can I jump in really quick? Thank you. We could keep it because I was looking at this, and that's where I went to some of my notes, which I don't need them all included, but I was reading that. I lost it really quick. Where was that one? I imagine that this process is very uncomfortable to be scrutinized and evaluated on your work performance in public. So I wanted to be really mindful of that, but I also want to be very clear. My job as a trustee is to put any personal opinions to the side and do my best to support you in being a great superintendent so that our staff and students can all succeed. I've chosen to be very direct in my written evaluation in constraining what I've seen from my perspective and my concerns because that's what I promised to the people who elected me. And I want to specify 3 specific items right now that I believe should be prioritized. The first is for me to properly govern the district, the trustees too, we need to be able to do our jobs well. And that includes not only presenting us with your recommendation for items, but also the other options that you considered and the thought process behind it. Right now, you give us recommendations late and without context, and it sometimes puts us in really uncomfortable situations. It's also become common practice for our own department experts to be ignored or reprimanded if they disagree with a recommendation. Going forward, I would like to see you grow as a leader by building a community that believes in you and supports you and your decisions, which will make it much easier for me as a board member to support your recommendations. Second, external communication is crucial to the success of the district, especially when it comes to making changes. How we message things matters. It is not always about what is said, but how it's said. And a lot of our problems could be solved, if not prevented completely, by getting in the habit of thinking through how words and actions might be perceived and what kinds of reactions could be expected and then how we might respond in the case that happens. Third, we need to fix the culture in the district. You certainly did not cause the climate problems, but I do not think it's gotten better at all under your leadership. And we need to take time for deep, meaningful, real talk about what's really going on inside of our schools, and we need to start inviting the people that our decisions directly affect into the conversations. So my evaluation leaves a lot of room for improvement, and it is my intention to support you in being the kind of superintendent that the 320,000 students of Clark County deserve. So if nothing changes in the way that things are done or the culture within the district starting at the top, then you can expect a similar evaluation next year, as I will not reward bad behavior. And I certainly will not reward it with another employment contract.
Quick freeze frame. I said that comment about not rewarding his bad behavior because the week before, a high-ranking female administrator spoke to the board about some concerns that she had with Jara, and then he used that exact phrase when telling her about her new demotion.
I hope that you will include more people in the process so that everyone knows that they're valued and that they are an important piece of the puzzle. I'm going to remain optimistic about our ability to work together towards the common goal of making CCSD #1 for kids, and I am looking forward to a fantastic 2020 under your leadership. And that's all.
It would, in fact, not be a fantastic 2020 under his leadership.
Thank you. Trustee Young?
It doesn't matter what you say, it matters what you do. And my big thing is that there is a lot of fear in the district. People are terrified. I've had people say to me, and this is unsolicited, I can make this 2 more years. And I don't like hearing that. And I don't ask for that. But as we just kind of move forward, I've often said the Maasai warriors out of Tanzania, they don't ask you, how are you? They ask, how are the children? That's their greeting. How are the children? And so my point is, anything that we do, for me, is always going to be about the children. And then it's the teacher. Because if you take care of the teacher, they're going to take care of the children.
I think Superintendent Jara has a few words he would like to say.
We have a lot of work on behalf of the 320,000 children. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when you push, as I said publicly, the system pushes back because change is hard. Sometimes adults don't like change, and I understand. I hear loud and clear that communication is something that I know that my chief communications officer have continued to discuss. Mm-hmm. But I am, and I'm going to be honest, I am somewhat disheartened by some of the comments that some trustees mentioned, because it's the first time that I hear of some of the statements and publicly comments that have not been discussed with me. We have a lot of work to do for our children. I believe in the kids. If all the adults, 40,000 employees, focus on kids, our kids will be able to do amazing things. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to serve as your superintendent, because this is a long-term commitment, because as I said in my opening comments, this is a phenomenal community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Superintendent Jara.
Yes.
I want to thank you also, Dr. Oliver, for joining us and for serving as an ear to lend for the trustees during the process. We definitely are going to clean this up in January, and I look forward to getting a head start, because we'll have a rubric in place in February when we're supposed to, and it'll be a lot easier for us to keep track of. So I look forward to that. And then also I want to thank Dr. Jara. I know it's hard to sit here and hear constructive and non-constructive criticism sometimes. I know that this last year we've had our ups and downs, but I just want to point out that I feel like we were mostly trending downward prior to you being here. So it's a step in the right direction. I also know that it's really hard to enter a new environment, especially an environment that's in a state of turmoil. And I do think that there's more good than bad. So, and I look forward to seeing you at your retirement party.
This was legit the most embarrassed I had ever been at a board meeting, and I once went viral at a board meeting for being racist. This was so much worse. And then after agendizing the superintendent evaluation, next came the board evaluation. Lola had no problem just grabbing the evaluation rubric from Balanced Governance, which was thorough and fair and allowed for actual discussion and accountability. So that was good for the board, but the superintendent's rubric was completely watered down first. First thing, January 2020, was the election of board officers for the year. Those are the board president, the vice president, and the clerk. The president is not supposed to have any more power than anyone else. They're meant to chair the board and run the meetings, but CCSD's governance policies have been modified in a way that gives the president incredibly too much power. The president has full control of board meeting agendas, and only the president and superintendent decide which items will even make it to a future agenda. A lot of school boards use a rotation system in which the most veteran members who haven't served in a role yet are next up for it, unless they don't want it. This reduces alliances and unfair power dynamics. For example, the trustees and the majority of split boards to maintain control of the board year after year after year, like has happened in CCSD. The end of 2019, I am begging Linda Cavazos not to let Lola Brooks get reelected as president. I went full, Linda, listen, please be president. I'll nominate you. The other trustees are clearly frustrated with Lola right now, and they all like you. I will do anything. I will help you behind the scenes as much as you need, anything. Linda told me that she wasn't happy with Lola either, but she knew that Lola wanted a second year as president, and she believed that keeping peace with Lola and trying to resolve board issues amicably was the best route. Linda and I are very different in that sense. During the meeting, Lola really drilled in on the fact that board officers always serve 2 consecutive years and that there's a hierarchy that exists for a reason and should be respected, and so she deserves a full 2-year term as president. The weird thing is Lola's feelings drastically changed a year later during board officer elections for 2021, which we'll get to. Whatever. Lola was re-elected as president with myself and trustee Linda Young voting no. Linda Cavazos was then re-elected vice president unanimously. Allowing Lola to remain president is the one thing that I have ever been mad at Linda Cavazos about, and I was super mad about it, and she knew it. Soon in this episode, I'm going to tell you about the Battle of AB2, which happened in the middle of 2020. It was then that I said to Linda, I have to tell you, I'm still pretty mad at you for letting Lola become president again. None of this would have happened if you were president. Linda didn't bat an eye. She just said, Danielle, there is absolutely no way that you are more mad at me than I am at myself, which in turn made me not so mad at her anymore. But back to January, I was then nominated as clerk, which is actually the most important position. The clerk signs all of the contracts and agreements on behalf of the Board of Trustees, and it's the role that's written into the NRS to be accountable for what the board approves. I said thank you, but I politely declined the nomination because there's no way I'm going to sign my name to anything while Lola is board president. Then the Lindas both got in queue, and they asked me to please accept the nomination so that I would have a seat at officer meetings and be able to double check everything before it gets signed. I thought it over. I said, I'll do it with 2 conditions. I reserve the right to resign from being clerk anytime without explanation. They agreed. I pointed to the snoring fluff ball on my lap. I said, and Rose gets to be co-clerk. They laughed and they went, okay. I said, on the record, everyone agrees that Rose is co-clerk. They verbalized yes, and the vote passed unanimously. Me and the new co-clerk got professional photos taken in every single CCSD building that featured the wall of trustees, which is many, had the new photos swapped in. And that's why Rose and I permanently win the Cutest CCSD board member photo contest. Okay, check this out. The office. Oh my God. This is my dream come true. Next, we start to plan Jara's next evaluation. The next month, February, the board has a morning work session to plan the 2020 superintendent evaluation process. The deep shame that I had been carrying since that cold, dark night of Jara's 2019 summative evaluation drove me to find a better way. I vowed never again. I searched and I searched until I discovered other districts using balanced governance. I navigated their board meeting software, reviewed their previous superintendent evaluation meetings, downloaded their reference materials, and secured the rubrics each board used. The metrics used by each board to evaluate their superintendents were nearly identical to each other. The only differences were the names of the districts and the lingo they used. So clearly there was a standard balanced governance superintendent evaluation rubric, and remember, Jara's employment contract says that he will follow trustee policies, and our trustee policies are balanced governance. I gathered the examples into a PDF, and I emailed it to our board secretary to include as reference material for the work session. I printed packets for each board member, our attorney, and 3 extras in case there was anyone in the audience. During the meeting, I explained that Jara's contract states that he will follow our policies, and our policies follow balanced governance, so why would we not use this rubric? This is actually a great evaluation tool. Why are we reinventing the wheel? The trustees who I had grown to loathe at this point argue that we did all this work to make this rubric already, and all that work would be wasted. I'm like, so what? That rubric is terrible. It measures nothing. Like, I'm ready to die on this hill, okay? The discussion lasts forever. Some are saying why this new rubric won't work for us. And really quick, on a personal note, I will share that at this time, early 2020, multiple traumatic events occurred that took a toll on my mental health within the previous 2 years, and I had been in therapy specifically for those events for months. I also became extremely physically ill very quickly at the end of 2019. Before this, I was super healthy and feeling great, and now I'm going to doctors for at least 20 different symptoms, and none of the doctors could explain it. I'm talking like rashes, hives, surgery on moles that became precancerous that I had to have removed, cysts growing in my neck, full body pain, headaches, vision issues, and noticeable cognitive changes like my short-term memory, recalling of words, losing chunks of time. Just like think of a symptom, I had it. Long story short, I found toxic black mold in my closet that was attached to my bathroom and bedroom that I had been probably breathing for several months. So now it's February 2020. I'm in the house that my kids and I moved into 2 months ago that I'm still trying to set up, but I'm feeling like crap after living in 2 long-term vacation rental places consecutively, after having to immediately vacate our home and toss most of our belongings. And I'm still dealing with insurance companies, and now I'm researching how to heal from toxic mold poisoning, and I'm using my printer ink to make packets consisting of other school board superintendent evaluations to give to the Clark County School Board, of which the majority refuses to properly evaluate the superintendent. Like, this is not my job. Of all the things that I pictured when I was running for the board, none of this was at all close to it. And the reason I'm telling you this is to reiterate that fighting these assholes was not what I wanted to be doing. And while a lot of what comes next might seem exciting or dramatic at times, like now on to the next battle, that's only because I'm a theater kid at heart and an ENTP. None of the events that took place next were enjoyable for me at all. I was not having a good time, not even a little bit. And through it all, I continue to experience major challenges with my health and in my personal life. I have no idea why or how I forced myself to keep fighting these assholes. I only know that I used my wit and my dramatic flair because of who I am as a person. Back to that work session. The majority of the board wants to ignore the packets that I gave them with real life superintendent evaluation models. They know the 2019 evaluation was a disaster, but they believe the best course of action is to modify the garbage rubric to be a little less garbagey, and they didn't ask me to do any of this. And do I think that our staff isn't capable? They are happy to see that I'm trying to find solutions instead of trying to cause problems for once. It's then suggested that Lola and I work on a better version of this rubric together. Fine. I just had a birthday. My chosen word for the year was community. I guess I can give working with Lola Brooks a shot. Lola ends the meeting by saying that she will follow up with me with next steps to ensure that the process is fair and includes both of us. All right. A couple days later, I opened my laptop to find an email from Lola with a new draft version of the rubric. It's slightly different, not any less garbagey. Lola explains that the process will be that I review the changes that she made to the rubric. And if there's any verbiage that I think should be changed, I can list them out and I can include for each a detailed explanation of my reasoning to change to that instead of her version. I opened it, I read this, and I went, nope. I will not be giving Working with Lola Brooks a shot, not even giving her a response. This is not a game that I can win, nor do I want to try. and I closed my laptop. I have no regrets, even though Lola forever then on referred to this one and only example to tell as many people as she possibly could that Trustee Ford doesn't actually care about evaluating the superintendent, because if I did, I would have helped work on that process with Lola when she so graciously allowed me to be included in the process. So literally for the next years in public, many times, in closed sessions, and even when Lola and I ended up in full-day mediation against each other, she could be counted on to say, well, if you had just helped with the evaluation like I offered. Now I'll just mention something regarding early COVID, which was the same time. During a closed session about COVID, Jara was updating us in planning, and the way that he was talking about employees and throwing around the word furlough like it was nothing literally made my stomach turn. It was the way that he said it. He did not care. He has no concern for any humans. I was physically sick for a week, like separate from everything else. I could not shake the feeling of the district is not going to make it through this storm with Jara captaining the ship. CCSD is often compared to a ship. This was like a massive storm threatening all the ships and the people on it, and we all know that there's going to be damage. We know people will get hurt. We know we will have to repair the ship, but we're not going to take damage during the storm from the storm alone, because our ship has a captain that wants to sink the ship. He is going to be purposely steering all of us into as many icebergs as possible and getting away with it by blaming all of the damage on the storm. So I did not have it out for Jara before this, like people thought. But now I did. I was no longer going to patiently wait for his contract to expire. I was going to do anything that I could to not get him renewed, and I was going to keep my eyes open in the meantime for an opportunity to fire him and replace him with anyone else, anyone who would do their best to steer the ship during the storm. And the universe delivered that opportunity to me right away. Let me tell you that story. This story is called The First Ethics Complaint I Ever Filed. You never forget your first. It's April 2020. I go to my office in the admin building, which the people of CCSD have appropriately nicknamed the Taj Mahal. I open my door and I nearly step on a few sheets of paper that were stapled together. It had obviously been slid under my door. There was no cover page or post-it with context or anything. I skimmed the pages. What am I looking at right now? I do not know what any of this is. It's a copy of an email with a report, and I'm unsure of what is even being referenced in any of these things. The report includes several pages of meetings with prominent individuals, mostly elected officials, the date that the meeting occurred, and the topic of conversation. I know about a third of the names on this list, and of that third, most are people that I like or that I know to be good. Whatever this is, it does not appear to be a smoking gun. At this point, it was pretty common for people to send me stuff to look into. But, I usually can't just drop everything and chase every rabbit, especially if it doesn't appear to be related to anything that I can do anything about. This was different, though. It had been slipped under my door by somebody who obviously did not want anyone to know that it came from them. And the only people who would have access to my door are people who work directly with the board or directly with Jara. The top floor of the Taj Mahal is the office of the superintendent and the office of the board of trustees. They're separate from each other in two different wings, with the superintendent administrative staff and the board administrative staff guarding the offices and the conference rooms. The superintendent's cabinet members and department leaders often were in the trustee conference room for agenda item briefings, and then the trustees go to the superintendent's wing for superintendent briefings. If anyone is ever working after hours, they could easily get to any office on that floor. There are other central admin employees with offices on the lower levels, but it would be kind of strange for any of them to just pop up to that level of the Taj Mahal, especially with the round-the-clock security guards that are watching and walking around. Also, a pandemic had just began, and most employees who worked on the more crowded floors were working from home. So I am assuming that this probably came from one of Jara's cabinet members. I figure that I should at least try to find out what most likely one of Jara's cabinet members wants me to know from this document. So here's what the document was. It's an email to the new Chief Communications and Government Relations Officer, Maria Marinch, from Patrick McNaught with GP Partnerships. The subject was Monthly Activity Report for February 2020. It reads, February highlights, activity report, strategy, discussion with elected officials, topics of interest, month ahead, other major projects in progress. Other metrics, number of contacts with elected officials were 101, number of contacts with CCSD staff 158, and this report was generated in March and it included January and February. Here's the first page. It says February highlights. Those things are payroll issues with CCSD, racial issues, trustee races, coronavirus. Then the activity report. It says strategy meetings with the CCSD team. It says met with the team on bill ideas, met with the team on district issues, met with Dr. Jara and Andy about Las Vegas Sands, met with Maria, met with team, met with Dr. Jara and Lindy Schumacher. Then it says discussions with elected officials, see attachment. Topics of interest. It says campaigns, state of their races, vetting of bills considered by officials with CCSD, payroll issues within CCSD, ballot initiatives, gaming tax, chamber lawsuit. The month ahead, continue to vet possible bills with CCSD. BDRs, which are bill draft requests that CCSD wants to bring once approved by trustees. Other major projects in progress, development of district BDRs. Okay, so then I don't know what this is, but it's from Patrick McNaught. I find his contact info, okay? I call Patrick McNaught. I say, hello, you don't know me. I'm new to this school board. I'm trying to learn my role. I see that you're working with CCSD regarding the legislative session. And then he tells me that no, he's no longer working with the district. He was hired in 2018 as a lobbyist around the same time that the board hired Jara. Patrick was given an 18-month contract to represent the board during the upcoming 2019 legislative session. He began his work, he delivered a report to Jara, and then was fired by Jara. He thought that was crazy since the district really should have a dedicated lobbyist to help move the bills through that the board approved. He asked to talk to the board about why he was getting fired, and Jara said no. I asked, well, what reason did Jara give for firing you? Patrick said, Jara told me that trustee Linda Cavazos learned that one of my other clients is a weapons conference vendor. Linda is very involved with Moms Demand Action, which opposes the NRA, but my client isn't with the NRA or with any gun manufacturer or anything. They just lease space for the gun shows as well as many other shows. Jara said that Linda went to him and said, you better fire Patrick McNaught immediately or else. He said that Linda had been ordered by the Moms Demand people to cut ties with my company. So then Patrick says, I asked to speak with Linda about it so that I could explain that I don't have any personal ties to the NRA, explain the situation. I was really looking forward to working with the board again. And then Jara said, sorry, man, Linda's one of the board members who supports me right now, and I just can't lose her support. And that was the end of Patrick McNaught working with the board. Quick legislative background lesson, and then we're going to continue the story, okay? So the Nevada legislature meets every 2 years in odd years. Most states meet every year, by the way. Nevada should change this. The school district is able to carry, meaning write and submit, 2 bills that would change the law in some way. The district also produces a one sheet, which lists and explains all the bills that are up for discussion and a vote. And it says whether the district as a whole supports, opposes, or is neutral on each one. As bills get heard by the Assembly and the Senate, some of them die, some of them pass to be voted by the other house, but the bills that come from CCSD and which bills the district supports are supposed to be constructed by and voted by the Board of Trustees. So put a pin in that. This is one of the major areas that is the role of the board and not the superintendent. And that's why the board would want a third-party lobbyist involved, who is not just the district's government affairs chief and staff. They're under the superintendent. So regardless of how wonderful the government affairs department might be, they still answer to the superintendent, not the board. So there was a session beginning when I joined the board, and I was learning all of that stuff at the time, as well as the role of the trustee and battling Jara in all the chaotic things that he was doing and the changes he was making, and battling half of the board who were trying to give our power to Jara through changes to our governance policies. If you remember, as soon as I joined, I had got a call from CCSD's communications chief at the time, Kirsten Searer, whom you will learn more about during this episode. And she basically told me to vote for this agreement with the county commissioners, or the governor was going to punish us by withholding funding for CCSD during the legislative session that was beginning. And that is all in the Diary of a New Trustee episode. So anyway, back to the very first ethics complaint story. Patrick McNaught had been hired the year prior in 2018 to prepare and represent the board during the legislative session. He would have been the one to communicate with the governor, and if the governor had threatened funding, he would have been like, excuse me, acting as a third-party legislative representative for the board And Jara's staff would not have been able to just call the trustees individually with threatening messages designed to influence our votes during meetings. Patrick told me that when he started, he was looking forward to working with the board, but when he asked when he would begin to meet with the trustees again like he had in the past, Jara said that won't be happening. Patrick would take direction from Jara only, and so that was what he did. Patrick documented the meetings Jara directed him to have. He sent in the first report, which he assumed would go to the Board of Trustees like it always had in the past, and then he was terminated by Jara right after because of Linda Cavazos. Okay. Sidebar / spoiler. Later, when I told Linda this story, and I wasn't close to Linda, like when this happened, it was kind of like, oh yeah, let me tell you, I forgot to tell you what happened, what this guy told me. She said, what? She goes, I had inquired about Patrick McNaught and any business connections with the NRA because I was wondering about that, but it ended there. I didn't direct Jara to fire him. I would never direct someone to fire someone else. That is not what happened. That is not why Jara fired Patrick McNaught. So Jara wanted to not ever have to deliver or present this report to the board. He probably freaked out when he saw the level of detail that was now public record. Details that were proof that Jara did one of the only things that the board could fire him for cause and without any payout. If Patrick kept working for the board, he'd expect the board to review that and eventually paths would cross and a trustee might go, oh, our lobbyist, that's right, got any reports for us? Jara could not let that happen. He covered it all up. Nothing to see here, folks. But somebody saw it and secretly slipped me a copy. After looking closer into the meetings and the names on the list, one of them stood out to me because this person had recently signed up to run for the Board of Trustees. That meeting was listed as met with Jeff Profit about trustee race. So then I asked Patrick why he had only met with one trustee candidate about the race, Jeff Profit, when there were many candidates running for 4 different school board seats. He tells me that Jara got nervous when he learned that Jeff Profit had filed to run for the board because he had a good chance of winning. And you see, Jeff and Jara had quite a falling out. I'm just learning all this too. I had no idea, okay? Jeff Profit was a manager of the sheet metal workers and he ran their apprenticeship program. Jara's son had obtained a spot in the program but was let go not long after he started. I spoke to Jeff later about this, and I have no reason to believe that there were any deals made to get Jara's kid in or anything, FYI. What Jeff told me is that Jara's son didn't do the work and would not show up and was let go like any other human would have been. But then Jara called Jeff, screaming at him about how they were mistreating his son by having his shift start at 5:30 a.m. in the morning and not granting the days off that he requested, and a bunch of other whiny, snivelly stuff, and he was going to regret doing that, and wah. Jeff's like, do your worst. Later, when Jeff signed up to run for trustee, the position of Jara's boss, Jara was like, oh shit, hey, Patrick, I need you to meet with Jeff and just like feel out where he stands. Like, is he mad at me? Is it water under the bridge? My contract is set to expire soon after the new trustees swear in next year, and I need to know how many votes I may or may not have to renew my contract. So that's what Patrick did. He went and talked to Jeff Profit about that. So this is all shady, but still I'm like, what am I supposed to do about it? And what part, if any, of all of this is actually a violation or something that somebody, probably someone in Jara's cabinet, wants me to figure out or do something about? So I call our board attorney, Marianne Miller, whom I absolutely do not trust at this point, but she's all I got. I don't want her to know specifically what I'm trying to find out because she will turn around and tell Lola, who will turn around and do something to try to protect Jara. So I ask Marianne a bunch of stuff that I don't actually care about. And I sprinkle in questions about lobbyists and the legislative session and meetings with candidates. I ask what kind of things a superintendent can direct lobbyists to have meetings about. Everything was like, yes, he can do that. Yes, that would be okay. She's tired of my questions, but she's my attorney. So I get to, can they direct lobbyists to meet with school board candidates? And then finally, she responds with something besides yes. Marianne says, well, that would not be advisable. I'm like, is that a no? She says it's a slippery slope because that's their potential boss who will make decisions that affect the superintendent's employment. They could be in serious trouble if there was crossover by using district funds, public money, to direct someone on the district's payroll in a way that serves the superintendent's personal financial interests. I'm so glad I was on the phone because I would not have been able to hide my eyes doubling in size and my entire face lighting up if I had been there in person. I forced myself to remain calm. I say, I think I understand. For instance, if a superintendent said, like, I don't know, something like, hey, go meet with the school board candidate and find out if they'll support my contract extension or not, that's basically what you're saying they can't do. Marianne confirms, yeah, that would not be a good idea. That's pretty much the only thing they can't do. I'm giddy at this point, but I'm trying to conceal it. I say, gotcha. And that would be really bad, right? Right, she says. They should not do that. Bingo. I ask another question that I really don't care about because I don't want to seem suspicious enough for her to mull the conversation over with Lola. I say, thanks for that answer. Just still trying to figure out my role versus the superintendent's role. You know, totally normal stuff. Thanks for your patience. All right, the smoking gun has been identified. But now what? I don't want to reveal the under-the-door detail to anyone. That would cause all of Jara's and the board staff to be individually interrogated, and then cameras would be installed pointing at my door. Also, this is not my job. If Jara is doing shit like this, a legal professional needs to handle it. This is the exact purpose to have a board attorney, and ours knows that this is not okay. Marianne actually educated me on that, and she has the authority to investigate something like this and pull this email, which would act as proof that Jara was using taxpayer dollars for his personal financial interests, and withholding pertinent reports from the trustees, and firing the lobbyist the board had hired. Even the world's worst board attorney at that point would know that they need to inform their client, the full board of trustees, about their employees' actions. So I email Marianne Miller. I CC my 2 trustee allies, the Lindas, because per Nevada open meeting law, if 3 trustees know about something that may come in front of the board, no other trustees can know about it. So legally, Marianne Miller could not share any of the things in the email with Lola. I wrote to her, Board Counsel Miller, I have reason to believe that Superintendent Jara has been directing the district's lobbyist in ways that serve his own personal interest. I request that you review the email sent to Maria Marinch on March 9th, 2020. I believe that you will find evidence to confirm my suspicions, and I trust that you will respond in a way that supports the best interests of the school board and the school district. I'm thinking that should suffice. I'm wiping my hands of it, but she responds, your request is outside of my scope of work, but you are free to investigate this matter and submit any proof you find as an individual. I'm like, bitch, I never said I don't have proof. Just in my head, though, I respond, and how would I go about addressing any proof that I were to find as an individual? She responds, well, you would file an ethics complaint with the Attorney General's office. I'm thinking, like, this is BS and absolutely not my job. This is not a road I want to go down. How can I make our attorney do her damn job? Who is the highest law person that I could tag in here for this? So I email Aaron Ford, the Attorney General of Nevada, with a generic message like, hi, I'm a CCSD trustee. Please give me a call. I need some advice, etc. I get the general auto response, like my message was received. That's it. A few days later, I email Aaron Ford again, but I'm more specific. Hi, I'm a trustee, and I feel that our board counsel is failing to properly represent the board. She's wasting taxpayer dollars and putting the school district in grave jeopardy by willfully ignoring important information. Please advise. I thought maybe he'd call me within a couple of hours and I'd have time to make a sandwich first, but he called me within 5 minutes and I was not even prepared in my mind. I tried to explain it without revealing that it had been delivered under my door, but that I'm certain that this thing exists somehow. And how can I force our board attorney to look into it? And at this point, my reputation with a lot of elected officials was that I was kind of nutty and all over the place. So I'm confirming that for him. Aaron Ford obviously didn't want to get in the middle of whatever this was, and I don't blame him. He told me that if I or anyone has knowledge of something unethical, that person has a duty to report it by filing an ethics complaint. I'm like, I guess I'm filing an ethics complaint against the superintendent. Then I had to research, figure out how to explain everything, decide how much detail to include. I learned that I have to match everything to the specific NRS that it's a possible violation of. I get some legal advice. They ask how I'm sure that none of the stuff around Jara's son's employment was unethical. I say, I can't say for sure, but it seems fine. Also, I would want my son to be able to qualify for something like that and not be essentially discriminated against because of my position. I don't care that Jara's son got the apprenticeship. That's not related at all, except for a motive for the unethical thing. And the attorney advises me to include everything that could be a potential conflict because it's the commission's job, not mine, to determine whether something is a violation or not. And including that is the only way to actually get them to process it as context because they don't really care about my opinions of the context. So that made sense to me because I watched enough true crime shows and legal dramas to know that there's always like 10 counts of something and then most of them come back with not guilty verdicts, and then the one that matters is like found guilty with 20 years of prison, and then there's a sigh of relief across the audience and somebody wails in joy and justice is served. So I file the report, and then here's what it says. Here's what I said. I allege that Dr. Jesus Jara violated NRS Chapter 281A in several ways, using his position as the superintendent of the Clark County School District to attempt to influence the upcoming CCSD board trustee elections, specifically the election presently taking place in District B, where Jeff Profit, the business manager of Sheet Metal Workers Local 88, is running for a trustee seat. I further allege Dr. Jara used his position to gain employment for his immediate family, specifically his son, who I believe presently resides in Jesus Jara's home. Some facts and circumstances supporting my allegations are as follows. During the period of mid to late 2019, Dr. Jara used Patrick McNaught of GP Partnerships, the contracted lobbying firm for CCSD, to gain entry for his son into the Local 88 apprenticeship program. Local 88 is also a client of GP Partnerships. In the beginning of 2020, Dr. Jara's son was terminated for unknown reasons, leading Dr. Jara to having a falling out with Jeff Profit, business manager of Local 88, claiming his son was treated unfairly. When election season started, Jeff Profit filed for CCSD trustee candidacy. When Dr. Jara learned Mr. Profit was running, he directed Patrick McNaught, GP Partnerships, a contracted firm of CCSD, to meet with Mr. Profit to obtain information about his race. The benefit for Dr. Jara doing this is to obtain information regarding Mr. Profit's political motives, if he would support Dr. Jara's contract renewal that happens in 2021 and potentially other upcoming CCSD items of interest. Mr. McNaught sent reports that included trustee races as one of CCSD's lobbying priorities and cited in the activities report that the meeting with Profit was about his trustee race. In March of 2020, GP Partnerships was terminated by Dr. Jara, even though the contract wasn't fulfilled and without explanation. In summary, I believe there is enough evidence to support that Dr. Jara knowingly violated several sections of NRS 281, using taxpayer resources for his own political and personal gain, by 1. Helping a family member to obtain employment, and 2. Using a CCSD contracted lobbyist to influence a political election, one that in this case literally elects one of his 7 bosses. There is also enough circumstantial evidence to support that Dr. Jara may have directed CCSD staff to alter the records on file from GP Partnerships so as to not reflect his wrongdoings. So I added that last line just in case Marianne told Lola or Jara about my request and emails accidentally went missing. I could see that happening. I called Jeff to let him know that I included the info about Jara's son working for him, but that I was in no way implying that he may have done something unethical in that situation. It was just how I was advised to file it. A week or so later, I got a call from an investigator scheduling another call to go through everything in detail. At the end of that call, he tells me that 90% of the time, it seems like personal grievances are at work, but this one does not. He's going to make recommendations to have this looked into, but can't confirm anything. He'll update me when he can. He calls a few weeks later. He lets me know that it passed jurisdiction, meaning that it will be investigated deeper and it will go in front of the Ethics Commission for an answer. Then he tells me that I can't talk about it to anyone now that it's an official investigation. I did not know that, and I was not happy about it, and I really wanted the public to know that Jara did this. I wanted to use this as a reason to call a meeting. This is what I was hoping for, like give me a reason to call a meeting to show the rest of the board what he did, and then vote on terminating his employment. But all I could do was wait and be silent, and both of those are equally my least favorite things to do. I learned that the complaint was discoverable if somebody was searching specifically for it. For instance, if they had the complaint ID number, some reporters were able to find it and report on it, but I couldn't comment on it. And then it ended up looking like I have something to hide because I wouldn't answer any questions. Okay. And it made it seem like the Jara's kid getting hired was a shady thing going on. Additionally, it only included my explanation of the complaint, not the evidence I submitted, which is really a you need to see it for yourself kind of thing. Also, that evidence included a meeting with an individual that I was not yet aware of, but that I should have included in this ethics complaint for the same exact reasons. I made that connection about a year later when I started looking into a trustee who had recently joined the board in 2021 and was waving red flags immediately. I will reveal that information in a bit. So I learned from this, and the next time that I filed a complaint against Lola Brooks, which I covered in the episode, The CCSD Board Member Bought by Billionaires, I put all of the evidence in a public Google Doc. I printed handouts for the audience and board members, and I gave public comment during a board meeting, reading a draft of the complaint that I was prepared to file later that day. June 2020 was Jara's mid-year evaluation. We were told that we have to phrase things in a way that is positive and actionable instead of critical without any opportunities for improvement. Here's an example of how fun that was.
Trustee Ford?
I have just one regarding operational oversight, and I know we're supposed to do this not as what was done wrong, but what we can do for improvement. So I guess the way to say this would be less relying on other superintendents, vendors, and consultants who are mostly aligned with the Council for Great City Schools and Chiefs for Change, who don't understand CCSD, and instead begin listening to principals and teachers about the needs of the community, and also community members who also understand the unique needs of the district.
So could you summarize that in a very short, succinct statement, and something that is measurable that we can actually determine if it happens?
Less relying on other superintendents, vendors, and consultants outside of the district, and more listening to principals, teachers, and community members in the district. So I guess we could cross them out next, in the future. How many were we using from this list? How many are we using from this list? And then we'll have that data.
Well, then I'm just trying to find this. So do you think that highly correlates with effective operational oversight and the metrics that are outlined here?
I do.
Okay, so let me review the metrics. Trustees are informed of major structural changes. Structural changes are based on sound reasoning. Structural changes are communicated to the public. Structural changes consider options for streamlining processes. And possible unintended consequences of structural changes are vetted prior to implementation. So do you think that how he interacts with external people ties directly with those metrics?
I do. I think you got the message. I had said that if my ratings and comments are going to be questioned, then we could go there. But I think directly related to COVID, the way that it's been done, the operations of it, the failure to alert people in enough time, the stress that has been put on the district principals and teachers is directly operational. And I think that the problem, so if we're just going to go to the root of the problem instead of making it a solution like I was trying, the problem is that there's too much listening to outside people who do have a agenda, or who are trying to make changes at a national level and don't have the best interest of CCSD or understand the district's unique needs. I think that's put us in tough positions. I think our ELL and our special needs students are not getting the support that they need. We're not moving at a fast enough pace. It's impacted distance learning, and it's impacted the way that our schools operate. So I do think that all those things are under operational, and I would like my comments, like I said them, to be included, and my rating as well.
Okay, Cindy, so did you get that summary? Do you want to give her a short summary again? Just the statement, just the actual. Okay, relying less on other superintendents, vendors, and consultants outside of the district and listening to principals and staff in the district.
And community members who understand the unique needs of CCSD.
It's supposed to be a very short statement, but
I can work on it later if you want, but that's what I got.
I was just trying to get through it, to be honest. There was so much going on with the district, the height of COVID. My health was declining because I was trying to treat my mold poisoning on my own, but I was making it worse without knowing that I was. You can see it in my eyes in this clip. I just wanted to do the process per his contract and just get it documented. The end result of that mid-year evaluation was that he was going to work on 4 specific things, which were voted on as a metric to use for Jara's end of the year evaluation for 2020. These wouldn't be the only things, but we would be taking these things into consideration. I was so over it with this meeting, but I also wanted to make sure my comments were included because Lola kept mine out of the 2019 year-end evaluations. So here was the 4 things that came from that. Number 1, develop and adopt a formal communication plan, developing a clear communication flowchart with top-down and bottom-up approaches, develop protocols to resolve operational issues and develop specific timelines. 3, develop protocols to look at committees and working groups to make sure that they are reflective of our community and include people closest to the work. And 4, develop a plan for addressing diversity staffing issues in the district, including teachers, administrators, police, and support staff, with the goal of mirroring the CCSD community. We voted on that. It was unanimous to include for Jara's final evaluation. The last item of this meeting was trustee requests, and I had been wanting to bring something up to the board, but I waited for the appropriate meeting, which was this special meeting about Jara's evaluation, okay? Since day 1 of Jara's employment, the board did not have a single opportunity to discuss his performance or plan for the termination date in his contract. Mary Ann Miller told the board over and over and over that we cannot discuss Jara's contract or performance unless it's at an agendized meeting, specifically for that, and I believed her. I didn't know at the time, but we should have been holding attorney-client meetings about Jara, but Mary Ann always reminded us that saying anything about his employment could cost the district lots of money in lawsuits. So again, my goal was to follow his contract to the letter and also not cause his employment termination date to be extended by failing to act per his contract. It was really a tough line to walk. I'm going to read verbatim what I said and the response that I received because the clip is kind of low quality and a little glitchy, but then I'm going to play the clip itself because you really just have to see it to experience it, okay? Or hear it if you're listening to this. Forward, I would like to request an agenda item for the board to discuss our thoughts about the superintendent's future employment status as his contract does end next year. And if we don't give any notice, it's going to renew for a year. So I think now is a good time to start seeing what our feelings are about that. Trustee Lola Brooks. Trustee Ford, I'm really disappointed in your strategy or whatever is happening right now, but I would be happy to provide you with the information you requested with Mary Ann Miller. Ford, what you call my strategy, I call doing my job, but tomato potato. Trustee Deanna Wright. Trustee Ford, this is so inappropriate. I'm sorry. You are inappropriately abusing a platform that is, you should have talked to council before you ever brought this up. This is Ford. This is a board meeting and it's a special session about specifically about the superintendent. Right. When you're talking about the superintendent's contract, that's a legal issue. And you should have ran that by our legal counsel. You are putting us in jeopardy. Ford. Okay, well, I also want to protect our butts and make sure that we do our due diligence of overseeing the superintendent and communicating and planning properly. So I will talk to Mary Ann Miller. I'm sorry if I did that wrong. However, I've made my thoughts clear. Brooks. Your thoughts are noted. Thank you, Trustee Ford. Now let's take a look at that whole clip because it's just really it's more enjoyable to see the whole thing in real life.
And the second one is I would like to request an agenda item for the board to discuss our thoughts about the superintendent's future employment status as his contract does end next year, and if we don't give any whatever, it's going to renew for a year. So I think now is the good time to start seeing what our feelings are about that.
Trustee Ford, I'm really disappointed in your strategy or whatever is happening right now. But I will be happy to provide you with the information that you requested with Mary Ann Miller.
Okay, what you called my strategy, I called doing my job, but tomato, potato.
Trustee Ford, this is so inappropriate. I'm sorry. You are inappropriately using a platform that is. You should have talked to council before you ever brought this up. This is
a board meeting, and it's a special session specifically about the superintendent.
When you're talking about the superintendent's contract, that is a legal issue, and you should have ran that by our legal counsel. You are putting us in jeopardy.
Okay, I also want to protect our butts and make sure that we do our due diligence of overseeing the superintendent and communicating and planning properly. So I will talk to Miriam Miller. I'm sorry if I did that wrong. However, I've made my thoughts clear.
Your thoughts are noted. Thank you, Trustee Ford.
I also noted at this meeting, as you can see reflected in the minutes here, that I did not agree that the superintendent should be able to increase his cabinet members' salaries without board approval. And here's what the minutes say. Trustee Young expressed concern regarding communication to the board of the superintendent's decisions to hire and promote staff. After discussion regarding the superintendent's authority to hire staff, Trustee Ford commented that the superintendent should not be allowed to increase the cabinet level employees' pay scale without board approval. She suggested that it might be helpful for the board to see an analysis of current cabinet members and their predecessors in the same or similar positions for the past 5 years. So at that point, Jara was already very smally, I don't know. He was raising his cabinet's pay, like not just like promoting, which is the superintendent's job, but he was actually changing the pay scale of different levels, which the board should have to approve. It has a fiscal amount that repeats every single year after that. And this is foreshadowing something, so I'm telling you. Now let's go into what is both my favorite and least favorite story of the Jara Chronicles, the Battle of AB2. This one is very complicated. It is a lot to follow and a lot of bureaucracy and government jargon, but I'm going to do my best to explain it simply because it is so fucked up that I need everybody to know that this happened, okay? So the Battle of AB2 itself is its own standalone trilogy. The Battle Prep, the Battle, and the Post Battle Battle, okay? We're going to go through all three. Trilogy in the Jara Chronicles, which is in the Jara Saga, which is in the evil billionaires universe, which may or may not have a theme park at some point in time. We don't know yet. Okay. All right. So it's July 2020. The board and the school district and the whole community and everybody had been hearing about distance learning plans from CCSD for months. They all suck. The community is furious. Everyone is tired of Jara except for the handful of people that were his ride or die. Governor Sisolak had called a special legislative session for the pandemic to change some laws and move some funding around that were necessary for that time frame. So I get a call from somebody who was working in Carson City where the session was held, who overheard a conversation between some CCSD staff members that were there and Jara, who they were on the phone with on speaker. They were like whispering, okay? They're like, Danielle, shit's going down. They're explaining to Jara that he is scheduled to appear and testify on a bill request, and he's freaking out. He's screaming at them because he was never told that he would have to testify, and principals cannot know that this bill request was his idea because he finally got the admin union to stop sending in letters of no confidence of him, and he could not afford to lose the principal's trust again, not this close to his contract expiration date. Jara was in campaign mode and he was trying to build support for his contract renewal. So what was the bill that Jara has personally requested? The bill, AB2, would have changed where school carryover or like unspent dollars went. As it was, any extra funds that schools had were held by the school. Perhaps a principal budgeted for 5 English teachers and they were only able to hire 4. The school would still have the money that would have gone to that 5th teacher's salary. It's not like the principal then went like, woo, extra money, I'm going to buy a boat. Right? They might still intend to hire a teacher with it. They might want to use it for a program to try to supplement not having that teacher. And if they still have those funds the following year when they submit their expected budgets, they would get less money to account for the carryover dollars that they already have. Bottom line, it's extra money for now held by the school for the school, and it has to be sent a certain way and reported to the district. It's not like because the school has extra carryover funds that they're like now balling. It's not like that. What Jara requested was for all of the carryover funds and all of the 376-ish schools at the time, which equaled $112 million, to be taken from the schools right then and then to be put into the CCSD general budget so that Jara and his CFO, Jason Gowdy, could determine how this money would be best spent for the whole district. Probably directly sent to some educational company out of Florida for their shitty canned curriculum. So I'm wondering, where did this bill come from? I'm 99% certain that all CCSD bills must be voted on at a public meeting by the entire board before CCSD can officially submit that bill request to the state. And I feel like if Jara had told us that he was going to submit a bill to take the money from the entire district during the special session, I would have remembered that. He clearly did something behind the board's back, but I'm not sure when or how yet. Normally, if a superintendent did this, acted without board approval, the board attorney would handle it. The normal next step would have been for me to contact our board attorney, but this wasn't a normal situation or a normal board or a normal board attorney. I decide that I'm going to act individually to cause as much chaos for Jara as I possibly can by first stopping him from stealing every single CCSD school savings account, and then by not allowing him to slither away from it by ensuring that everyone, including principals, knows that it was Jara who tried to do this. I start calling legislators that I know, calling people who I know legislators that I don't know to make sure that everybody knows what that bill would do to the district and they know that it came from Jara without the board's knowledge or approval. And that went much better than I could have even hoped. Everybody in Carson City was pissed. Why is this guy wasting our time with this? And why would he ever think that we would give him the school savings accounts? How delusional is this guy? So over the next days leading up to the session, Jara just kept digging holes for himself and adding on lie after lie, thinking that he was getting away with something. And I'm documenting it the whole time. When a dog does something bad, they steal a piece of food and then tries to hide where they think nobody can see it. And they're getting away with it, but it's we can see you. We can see your ass sticking out, okay? It was like that, but not a cute little furry ass with a little tail wagging. It wasn't like that. The ass sticking out that everybody could see was Jara. So I'm just going to let this play out and catch him lying to me, his boss, on paper to use against him somehow. So Assemblywoman Selena Torres had emailed me about it. Makes sense. She's a public school teacher. And I used this to start a conversation with Jara about it.
She asked Jara about the money staying in schools. She couldn't get a complete answer. And then she mentions that it seems that Jara is the one pushing AB2. I forward her email to Jara and then ask how the bill got to the legislature for this special session. Jara does not respond, so I forward that email to Brad Keating in Government Affairs to get an answer. Brad responds that after speaking with Dr. Jara, he asked him to provide the answers in red, and Jara says that it was the governor's bill, and when Jara saw it, he asked for it to be pulled. He also notes that Brad Keating is scheduled to testify on behalf of AB2. At this point, I'm just trolling him. Jara doesn't know that I know that he's trying to weasel his way out of testifying. And I know that he's majorly freaking out, so I just want to add to it. I respond, Superintendent Jara, I appreciate you answering my questions through Brad. I know that Brad is capable to represent the district during testimony, but this is very important and you should be the one testifying. You are the face of the district, and it is crucial that as superintendent you act properly and respectfully during the legislative session. You should be willing and ready to testify to the Assembly and Senate and answer as many questions as they need. We need to ensure trust and build relationships with elected officials as much as possible during this troubling time, and an absent superintendent during this critical time speaks for itself. You could cause the Assembly and Senate to lose trust in us and cause us to receive CCSD to receive considerably less funding, which will put the district and the people in it at an even greater risk. To be clear, I expect that you will be testifying today to both the Assembly and the Senate. By the way, it'll be mentioned later that trustees were individually directing Jara, and it will mean this. However, I don't agree that asking Jara to do his basic job is overstepping the role of trustee, but whatevs. Jara replies, Brad is very capable and his entire job is to represent CCSD in Carson City. As publicly stated multiple times, I work for the Board of Trustees, not one individual member, and I take direction from the entire board when provided direction at publicly noticed meetings. Jesus Jara. That was at 2 p.m., and it was almost time for the meeting to start, so we assumed that Brad would show up virtually to testify for CCSD, but there was actually a surprise guest, and you're gonna learn who that was in a bit.
So the surprise guest testifies, and then Jara calls in as the last caller because he's obsessed with principals believing him and getting his contract renewed next year.
And now, on top of when all this stuff is going on, we find out that everything that Jara told us that the state was requesting for a plan for schools, for 3 different plans, in-person, distance learning, and hybrid, was a lie. He said that they needed this whole crazy plan, and the community did not like it. And then we find out that we actually only needed to send in the dates and a few other things. We did not need to come up with this whole plan. That's a whole other thing.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Jesus Jara, Superintendent in Clark County School District. I apologize, I was trying to log on and connect. I was not called on opposition, on neutral on AB2. I'm calling to set the record straight. Given that CCSD was mentioned as the author of the bill, what currently happened, if I may, and indulge me, Mr. Speaker, is that during the budget process, working with the state superintendent for public instruction and the flexibility in April, there was conversation around $120 million projected in the carry forward dollars. Going through the process in early June, I received a call and asking for flexibility, what I would like on AB 469 and NRS 388G. During conversations we had, this has been an ongoing conversation with the state superintendent as she would carry the bill. However, in working with our principals, and been waiting, and that's very public around the fact of lack of budget numbers for us to open our schools. I just want to go on the record and say that on July 7th, as the superintendent, I spoke to the speaker that I did not want this bill to move forward. July 7th at 3:12. Spoke to the state superintendent at 3:20. Proclamation that was released at 5:17. And prior to that, I know that Director of Government Relations called the governor's office at 3:58 and at 4:03 that we did not want this forward.
Mr. Jara, you're at 2 minutes, and I will gladly allow you to elaborate in an actual hearing as opposed to public comment, but I want to be consistent, and I will take the privilege of the chair at the end of this meeting to further elaborate. But you're at 2 minutes, so we need to move on.
Thank you.
So I'll go back under Order of Business 15 and make it abundantly clear that AB2 was exclusively the request of CCSD to be placed on the agenda, and that request was withdrawn 2 hours before the actual proclamation issued, which was too late. And so you don't get to light a firecracker and then run just before it goes off. I don't believe that there's going to be any reason to really belabor AB2, but I want to make it very clear who initiated this request, and I think it's unfortunate to respond in a public comment form as opposed to taking responsibility.
So we go through this whole thing. Jara is outed. Everybody knows that he's responsible for the bill. He is embarrassed. He's upset. He's sending emails out to the entire community. He's got it documented to the minute that things happened. This is a person, by the way, who never can answer a question of when something happened or when something was said. Not even the year, the month, nothing, never has answers. And for this thing he's defending himself against because he knows he's lying and is caught, he has every single minute documented, okay? And he still ends up getting called out and proven that he was lying to the community, to the state, and to his bosses.
Naturally, I close the loop on my trolling by putting his lies in an email so that there's a record. I write, Superintendent Jara,
While I was watching the meeting today, I asked Brad if he was testifying, and he indicated you were going to testify on the bill. It ended up that no one from CCSD testified, but you called in to give public comment. In your public comment, you stated that AB2 was brought up by the State Department of Ed. Earlier in the meeting, Speaker Frierson stated that AB2 was CCSD's bill, and he stated that again at the end. But in your email to me this morning, you said that AB2 was originally proposed by the governor. I'm very confused by this, and I would like to see any emails sent to or from the state about any possible changes to school carryover funds. Will you consider this a board request, or should I file a public records request? Thank you in advance. And instead of ignoring me or replying to tell me to mind my own business like usual, Jara calls me, which he absolutely never did unless forced. I do not answer, and he responds. Hi, tried to call you. I am on the phone with Brad Keating. I will have Brad Keating add the emails to Smartsheets for all board members to see. Jesus Jara.
So we technically won the Battle of AB2. Jara was not able to steal all the money from schools, and everybody figured out what he was doing.
But I still wanted to know exactly when and how the bill was requested. A reporter friend was able to dig up the email that Jara sent to the state, and that's when I realized that I had only seen a portion of it because the part requesting the bill had been deleted before forwarding to the Board of Trustees.
And now on to the post-battle Battle of AB2. This is when I did contact the attorney. I said, Marianne, yesterday it was confirmed that Jara requested AB2. Besides all of the lying and manipulation he engaged in to hide it so as to not upset principals, there's the fact that he requested the bill without board approval that needs to be addressed. The full board needs to have a conversation about Superintendent Jara's behavior immediately. What do I do to make that happen? And here's Jara posting on Twitter about it. We never saw the bill until posted, waiting to speak to clarify for the record, #integrity. I respond, nobody saw the bill until it was posted. Who asked the governor for the bill multiple times? You, bro, you, bro. That was when he was waiting. He was calling in, give a comment at the end, not actually answer questions and testify about it. Okay. But you know who does show up to testify on behalf of CCSD for some reason as a way to help Jara out? John Vellardita, the executive director of CCEA, the teachers union. Hello. He had submitted an amendment to the bill, I'm sure as a Jara begging him to do it so that it technically involved CCEA somehow. But he even says during the call where he's testifying that he didn't even know about it until a couple days before.
Is that correct? That ultimately the Clark County School District will have the authority to decide which local school precincts they will be pulling carryover funds from and where those funds will be going.
So to the first part of your question, again, we did not draft the language of this bill. Having said that, if you look at Section 1 and you look at the second line in Section 1, where it says, for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020, a large school district may treat any year-end balance carried forward by a school precinct as restricted fund balance. So we view the meaning and intent of may treat any year-end balance carried forward by a local school precinct as all year-end carryover dollars would be subject to this. So we don't view it as the district could select one school and not select another. Now, if the drafter of this language can explain the meaning and intent that's different than that, then we would concur with that. But because we didn't, we would read that as every school, not cherry pick your school.
That is helpful. I appreciate hearing the intent. I think ultimately we do need to hear from the school district and from principals in the school district.
Okay, so you'll hear in the future about how John Vellardita is the reason why Jara left or whatever. No, they were besties the entire time, even to the extent that John Vellardita is going to go out on a limb and help Jara protect his reputation so that he can remain superintendent. Marianne Miller tells me, you obviously know about the process for asking for an agenda item at a regular meeting. The next meeting is not until August 13th. Pursuant to NRS 241.033, you have to give special notice for an agenda item to discuss character, misconduct, etc. 5 days if the notice is hand-delivered and 21 working days if sent by certified mail. She says you may want to consider asking for a special meeting to consider his conduct. Same notice, rules apply. Any 3 trustees can ask for this in writing. You could offer as a concession that the item appear on the August 13th agenda rather than on a special meeting agenda. Be careful about potential open meeting law violations when you reach out to other trustees. Phone calls or face-to-face discussions are safer than text or emails. That's suspicious. I wonder how many times she's told that to freaking the other trustees, okay? Anyway, and here's a statement from Governor Sisolak and the Nevada Department of Ed. Today, Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak and Nevada Department of Education Superintendent John Ebert released the following statements regarding Assembly Bill 2 and Clark County Superintendent Jesus Jara's statements that the agenda item stemmed from a request from the State Department of Education. Ebert says, it is incredibly concerning that Superintendent Jara is again blaming the state for his actions instead of taking responsibility for CCSD's request to sweep funds from individual schools to cover the district's funding deficit. Once it became clear the proposal did not have support, Superintendent Jara disrespected our elected officials and the entire CCSD community by misrepresenting his intentions. As a leader in education, he has a responsibility to set an example for our children. Blatantly altering the truth is not only a bad example, but it's a disservice to the educators, students, and families he represents. During this unprecedented crisis, we need to leverage our collective capacity and resources to do what's best for students and educators in both the short and long term. As we navigate this challenging and uncertain time, it is imperative that we lead with honesty and transparency. Nevadans deserve nothing less. Governor Sisolak added, in the midst of a global pandemic and a legislative special session to address our historic budget shortfall, we are focused on how to solve the major challenges facing our state. However, I cannot sit back and remain silent as Superintendent Jara tries to wrongfully place blame rather than taking responsibility for his actions. Enough is enough. While I'm not surprised, I'm incredibly disappointed that once again Superintendent Jara has tried to mislead the communities he represents and blame others in order to avoid the repercussion of his poor decisions. Being superintendent of one of the largest school districts in the nation requires leadership, especially in the midst of a crisis, and leadership requires honesty. Unfortunately, that is not what we get from Superintendent Jara. Clark County students, staff, and families deserve better. So me and the Lindas confer, and we plan to hold Jara accountable for 2 things that were big enough that the other trustees should not ignore and worthy of being made public so that the public knows. First, sending in the bill without the board knowing, and then deleting emails to us, which I took the reins on that one. And then number 2, an item about misrepresenting the reopening plan guidelines from the Nevada Department of Ed, which Linda Cavazos took over that item. And then an item with discussion and possible action to terminate Jara for convenience. So me and the Lindas each sent in the request at the same time for the meeting and the exact items. We go through the process with our attorney. She drafts a letter of notice for Jara, and then she tells me that she told Lola to send it. Lola ignores our attorney and will not notify him. Now it's the last day to serve Jara based on the time frame that we requested, and our request will expire and we'll have to start over. Marianne will not notify Jara herself, even though she's our attorney. I'm like, what exactly is required to serve him, and who besides Lola or you can serve him? She sends me the language that she sent Lola, and she tells me that anyone from the board office could serve him. I ask, so I could? She says that yes, I could. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but even I know that it's not a good idea for me to both request this meeting and then hand deliver a notice to Jara. Okay, so even though my attorney cleared me to do that, I hired a process server. I meet this guy at the admin building, the place where Jara works, the place that one would expect the superintendent to be during working hours. There's a private garage for the superintendent, board members, and a few select cabinet staff, and it's gated. So I give the guy my garage remote so that he can wait in there for Jara to get to his car, like at around the same time where he would be coming out. I'm trying to get confirmation that Jara is there, and then I learned that he left hours ago, like he does many Fridays and Thursdays and Wednesdays and Tuesdays and Mondays. And I'm like, shit, I do not know his address. I had a secret helper at the time, and they were able to get Jara's home address. So there were a lot of people involved in this happening and a lot of working parts. This was not just me being erratic and mean to Jara just because I can. Okay. So I passed that address to the process server, and he drives to Jara's house and he hands it to Jara at his front door minutes before our request for that meeting would have become invalid. I hear from the grapevine that Jara is furious, and that made me smile. Now let's talk about the response to that meeting. That agenda goes public, and oh my God, the people that it brought out of the woodworks. true colors shine through, it was a fucking rainbow. Even though the vast majority of the community educators and elected officials were so done with Jara at this point, the business community and CCEA were still supporting him. They're sending us scathing letters about how we're disrupting the district and we're playing games, etc. And they are using their connections to news stations to make it look like the board members are doing the drama again. Oh, and when I say business community, I do not mean the mom and pop shop on the corner or the service providers. I'm talking like big business executives of the Vegas hotels and casinos, the Tourism Authority, the Chamber of Commerce, who are all somehow on the same side as CCEA's executive director, John Vellardita, CCEA being a teachers union, which is usually on opposing sides with the business community, but I digress. Okay, so I'm talking to a principal about it. Okay, this is someone that pretended to be Jara's friend, and I'm venting. I'm like, why the fuck are these people so dead set on Jara staying and being superintendent? What is one reason that they could have? Give me one single positive quality that Jara has. I've never, ever seen this man have a single original idea. I've never seen him do anything remotely impressive. What am I missing? And he says, Danielle, I thought you knew. I thought you knew why. I go, no. He says, I'm very surprised that you have not figured out why they support him. Now I'm getting frustrated. I'm like, I don't know. Does he have some secret pool of money and gold bars that he just swims in, like doing the backstroke like Scrooge McDuck? Does he have something on them and now he's blackmailing them? Like, I mean, I already figured that deals are being made, but I don't really know what those are. Like, what is it? He goes, Danielle, it's because he's stupid. They all know that. Jason Gowdy knows that. John Vellardita, the Chamber of Commerce, they've all figured out how to get him to do what they want. They all get what they want from him and they stay out of each other's way. I processed that for a moment. That's the only explanation I've heard so far that makes sense. And this clarity brought some relief, but it also brought disappointment in two ways for me. First, I blame movies and TV for giving me false expectations about what it would be like to have an evil arch nemesis and what qualities would be like a base standard. I blindly assumed smarts would be one of them. And here I am thinking that I've finally found the one. My Lex Luthor, my Moriarty. But all I got was Captain Dum-Dum. Why did I get this one? Is there an app? And if so, how do I unmatch? And then this is when I began to realize that evil as Jara is, he's no evil genius. And he's not the final boss. But I knew that person was out there somewhere, and I would have to just keep searching. Second, I continue to be disappointed with humanity in general. So that wasn't new, but I was specifically disappointed with the people controlling the city of Las Vegas and education in Nevada. It's one thing to know that people are corrupt. It's another to see the things they do and then become their enemy number one. And then the realization that their problem with me isn't about what I'm doing. It's that they don't want me or anyone doing anything that they haven't signed off on. It's not that I was going against any belief system or ideology, which I could at least understand. It's that they've worked to set Jara up to run in the way they coded him to, and I'm now annoying them by doing my role properly, the one which I took an oath for. Nice to know it's not personal to me because they would do this to anyone, but that also doesn't make me feel much better. And next in our story of the Jara Chronicles, CCEA reveals they have an announcement about me. Now listen, I started out fine with John Vellardita, and I was very supportive of CCEA when I became a trustee. Here's a quick top of head list of things that I've done to support CCEA. I attended their rally. I did multiple meetings I had with JV to hear his concerns. I gave them space to pass out materials at my F Squad events. I had them as a speaker about SOTs at another of my F Squad meetings. I went through, my God, this crowd of angry educators during the strike meeting that ended up getting shut down. During their protest about it, just to walk and say to JV and their members that I support their protest and I am happy they're there. Oh my God, like so many things. But then the second that I did something that threatened any power that John Vellardita had, his mask came off and he began launching hit campaigns to frame me first as a dummy and then as a liar and then as anti-teacher and eventually a political mastermind. So news of the meeting about Jara comes out and CCEA/John Vellardita send a press release to all 18,000-ish teachers saying that they will be revealing the truth about Trustee Ford and her hidden agenda. And I'm like, ooh, I want to know. And it was, so this thing was hilarious. It was like everybody was waiting to hear what this big reveal is. There's a podcast about it that launched, and you hear JV and another educator discussing it. And JV basically says, yeah, Trustee Ford came and she met with our group, our like campaign candidate political group. And she told us that she plans on running candidates on her own, and that she's going to become president, and she's going to take over control of the board, and she's going to fire Jara and all this stuff. And then the other educator is like, oh, no, she didn't. He's like, yes, she did. And I'm here going like, why is this even surprising for this person? Because he's literally telling you I said this in a public meeting. Also, sidebar, then I put it on social media. I'm like, there's kind of some truth to that. Basically, what I said is like, hey, I joined the board. I realized that the governance policies are terrible. The board has lost their power. I hope that we can get new candidates to join the board. I'm going to do what I can to get the best candidates to win the election. I'm in line to be vice president, and then possibly president at some point. I know exactly how we can fix our governance policies. I'm going to fire Jara the second that I can. I mean, none of this is a fucking secret, okay? But it was this like big thing that got sent to every educator in the district, whatever. And listen, I'll say this about John Vellardita, okay? I'm going to say this. Of all the people that I have accidentally ever spilled my scalding hot coffee on, which I need more than one hand to count, but less than two, John Vellardita is the only person that I do not regret accidentally spilling my scalding hot coffee on. Okay. Yeah, I said it. And I call this next little anecdote the Three Little Pigs. So now I've got this fucking guy, John Vellardita, attempting to discredit me at this point by claiming that I'm an evil mastermind. And then I've got this new fucking guy, Tommy White, whom I had no idea even existed, but he's the president of a labor union and apparently good friends with Jara. He pops up to slut shame me on Twitter and call for my resignation. So Tommy White, the fucking wannabe digital artist apparently, posts this badly designed digital flyer, which I assume was intended to rile the masses against me. Okay, boomer. But this flyer thing includes a photo where I'm wearing very tasteful lingerie, which he was able to dig up from my public photo albums. And then he adds the words like, what did Trustee Ford mean when she said it's just a dick measuring contest? Oh my God. So I was a professional model for over 10 years, mostly spokesmodeling and promotions for events and conferences, some commercials, some reality TV, and often demo modeling for photography students and professional development classes for boudoir photographers. The latter being where this photo is from. So this dummy not only tries to convince others to demand my resignation from the school board via slut shaming, but he also chooses a photo in which I was part of an educational experience. Dum 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 dum. That blew up in his face. I'm not sure what result he was after. It's 2020 at this point, not the time to do that. I don't know if he expected me to be like, oh no, not this photo where I'm a total smoke show. I am so ashamed. So what I did instead of being ashamed is that I took a screenshot of his tweet and Twitter handle and I posted it on my Facebook page. Then I posted a lot more boudoir pics in case anybody else wanted to ever use them to try to discredit me later. And here they are again, since later could be now, since I am running for the State Board of Ed.
And if you're listening on an audio platform, you're just going to have to use your imagination or go check out the YouTube video.
And please feel free to use them, okay? This took a lot of time and effort, and a lot of makeup artists and a lot of people are involved in this, so like, thank you. Some of these photographers actually got new clients from it, but not one single person joined his movement to recall me. All that Tommy White managed to do was piss off a lot of female teachers and parents. Vicky Kreidel, the president of the other teachers union, NEASN, led a charge for educators to post their boudoir pics, and they did. Tommy White got absolutely blasted on Twitter, reprimanded by his union, and had his Twitter privileges taken away.
So shout out to all men who stand up against misogynists, and special thanks to Noah Cohn, whose reply on Twitter to Tommy White, business manager of the Laborers Local 872, actually inspired the title of this story. Noah writes, "You are a pig, a disgusting, misogynistic, nasty pig. Do you kiss your mother or sister or wife or daughter with that mouth? You should be ashamed of yourself. Grow up and take down these demeaning tweets." That was his response to Tommy White asking, Is Clark County School Board Trustee Ford going to teach pole dancing classes to our students for college credits? First of all, if education ever becomes progressive enough to include pole fitness and PE, sign me up. Those workouts are no joke. And second, if you are trying to ruin me, then why are you giving me good ideas?
So everybody's losing their minds at this point. Like, it was like gloves off. Everybody who had been just working things in the background were now up in the forefront. Everybody who supported Jara at all, which was just a few people, came out in support of him. Jara somehow managed to grow this following of women who supported him no matter what. It was very weird. All different women of different areas, one from one group, one from another. It was very strange, whatever. But here's a couple of them who were happy to jump in on the front lines to battle me and the Lindas against their precious Jara. One of them, which is Felicia Ortiz, the Nevada Board of Education member for District 3, whose seat I'm currently running for, by the way. And here's what she had to say about it. She wrote an entire article about her thoughts on the latest education drama. I went ahead and shared my favorite part. To our Clark County School District trustees, please ask yourselves, is this the right time to be addressing the termination of your only employee? Have you as leaders and managers done everything in your power to mentor, guide, and support your employee? Then I responded, yes. Now, how about we all focus on our own jobs? My job is to oversee the superintendent. Yours is not. She responds, my job is to ensure that all of our students receive the quality education they deserve. When adult behaviors and priorities are impacting our ability to deliver on that, then I will speak up. As his supervisor, why didn't you provide him feedback on his evaluation? Lola and her super tight, okay? I respond, Felicia Ortiz, that's great to hear that you will speak up about concerning behaviors of adults leading the school district. Here's my feedback from Jara's official evaluation at the end of 2019. Let's start here and work our way forward. Once again, blaming someone for their response to bad behavior is gaslighting. And once again, I will do my job of overseeing the superintendent and keeping the people in schools safe. You should be working on lowering teacher evaluation and student testing standards. Our students don't deserve the stress from testing next year, and our educators certainly don't need evaluation on their ability to educate during a pandemic. Let's all stay in our lanes. And then another Jara fangirl who was appointed to nearly every committee that Jara put together chimes in, Jordana. She responds, oh my God, are you seriously accusing Felicia, who's trying to get you to focus on reopening schools and funding, of gaslighting? Your attempt to shift the conversation away from the work that needs to be done because your little plan was rejected is a sad attempt at Trumpism. I don't even know what that means, but okay. I wrote back, pointing out gaslighting isn't gaslighting. I agree, let's all get back in our lanes. I'll handle overseeing the superintendent, Jordana. You do your thing on all the committees. Felicia, please focus on changing standardized testing and teacher evaluations. Let's go, team. And then, of course, you've got Felicia still online typing away at people when she never usually does this. We got this guy asking, can someone help me understand the controversy with Jesus Jara? I'm not sure I understand what happened and is leading to the no confidence meeting this week. Any insight? She responds, oh my gosh, it's a long story, but in a nutshell, we are as usual having budget cuts, and one of the proposed solutions was to use the savings, whatever Captain, I don't know what she's trying to say, schools to fill the gap. He was asked to put forward that option by the state superintendent and then decided it wouldn't be a good idea and asked for it to be pulled, and it wasn't. When he tried to give testimony to the artifacts, he was cut off. So the trustees thought he was lying about whether he had proposed a solution or not, and the state superintendent and governor also accused him of lying. She goes, I personally think they did that to deflect attention. And also, by the way, the state superintendent is her superintendent for the board that she's on. So she's also going against her state superintendent and saying that we shouldn't be going against our superintendent. Oh my God. Okay. So we have this meeting coming up. Everyone's losing their damn mind. The Lindas and I talk and we're like, okay, no doubt Jara, Lola, and Deanna Wright are plotting something to ruin this meeting. No doubt, no doubt, no doubt, no doubt. We don't trust Mary Ann, but she does work for us and she has a duty to protect the board from disruption. So let's get her to confirm that she will help it go smoothly, and let's find out what she thinks are the things that could be planning to do if they wanted to help Jara. So we get on a Zoom. I tell Mary Ann that I'm recording the call because I believe that she's advised me in the past in many ways that were wrong. She's okay with that. So she tells us that the only thing that she can think that they might do is to use something that we say against us. If something isn't directly related to the topic at hand, if we discuss anything that's not agendized. So they'll probably ask questions that are unrelated to the reference material to try to gotcha us. Even though trustees often discuss unrelated things, share a side story, etc., she advised us not to do anything like that because they would be looking for like anything they could possibly use to try and invalidate the item and end further discussion, like whether or not that's valid, okay? And then she tells us that we can only say that Jara misrepresented whatever. We can't use any language that implies intent. And the word lie, because he's a fucking liar, I can't say that because the word lie implies his intent. He had an intent to lie, not just he accidentally misread whatever. So we prepared documents for the meeting, slides for all the items, so there's no confusion, the exact details if we were to terminate Jara for convenience, like the amount paid, like just so much information ready. We prepped for this meeting like crazy, okay? So after the Battle of AB2 that we won because he didn't steal the money and everyone found out about his shit, okay? But now for the Battle of AB2, my goal was to fire Jara, but I knew we didn't have the votes, okay? Because 3 of us had already communicated about it. None of us could go talk to any other trustees. Like if we were able to, that would be great. You know, we couldn't. The entire purpose of board meetings is for the board to communicate with each other in public. That's how it should work. It's not how it works though. But we were going to have to use our time during the meeting to convince at least one other trustee of Jara's wrongdoings during the conversation. So I knew that Lola Brooks and Deanna Wright were not that trustee. Irene Cepeda was a maybe, but there was one trustee who I had some serious hope for, who fought hard against hiring Jara, who had done the work to find and bring a new model of governance to the board despite it never getting actually implemented. She's the one that brought balanced governance, who was extremely anti-privatization and consistently putting things on the record before I was on the board. So my actual goal was not to fire Jara. It was to present information in a way that would make Trustee Garvey want to fire Jara. So the docs that I created for this item are not my usual style. You've seen my notes by now. I'm color codes, I'm arrows, and bad words. Garvey is not. She's linear. She wants all the info. She wants every piece of reference info. And that's why the docs are the way that they are. And these are still part of public record and board docs as attachments for that meeting. So my thought process of this moment was best case, we fire him. Worst case, we will have on the record that 3 trustees supported terminating him in 2020 to prep for his upcoming 2021 contract termination date. The actual worst case scenario did not even cross my mind. And you're going to witness that in a second. So everybody is excited. Everybody is like waiting to watch. They're hoping he gets fired. They don't fully understand what's going on, but they know that the superintendent might be fired and people are ready to tune in. All the electeds that helped out during the session to make sure that Jara's lies were public, everybody wanted different COVID plans, reopening plans. Nobody liked what the future of CCSD was about to look like under Jara. Everyone wanted him gone. People that didn't even like each other agreed on this. So after discussing with our attorney and preparing, my strategy going into the meeting was just don't let them get me to say anything off topic. Don't say Jara is a fucking liar or anything direct or that implies that he has negative intent, or then it could cross the line into for cause. It opens a whole can of legal worms. Control my face so that Garvey doesn't think that I'm about to lose my shit and she actually listens. Stick to the facts and the references. Lead the conversation in a way that gives Garvey an opportunity to learn something and enter the conversation and save the day by holding Jara accountable. That was my plan. Now let's see how that all worked out for me.
Conduct of Dr. Jesus F. Jara. Before I turn this over to Trustee Ford, I would like it on the record that this is not meant to be a disciplinary hearing for Superintendent Jara. The agenda items are listed under the Board of Trustees to allow the full board to have a conversation about these topics. Superintendent Jara's contract specifically states that he and the Board of Trustees will operate within the agreed upon parameters within our formally adopted board policies. Those board policies are partially based on balanced governance. Policy GP 4.2 specifically states how issues between the superintendent and individual trustees are required to be handled. If an issue arises between the superintendent and a trustee, That trustee has an obligation to reach out to the board president in an attempt to work collectively to resolve the issue. At no point in time has a single trustee ever attempted to do this. Lastly, I want to assure the public that we are focused on reopening schools and serving our 320,000 students and families. And I don't want this to be a distraction away from our larger mission. I believe Superintendent Jara has some opening remarks, and then I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Ford.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, I'd just like to make a brief opening remarks, as Trustee Brooks mentioned. I'm hopeful that that today's meeting ends with the board's decision to allow me to continue to focus on our children and the critical work that is needed. I also believe that we can move past today and work together to ensure that all of our children succeed. I want to remain focused on all our kids. I want to continue working with our building principals, teachers, support professionals, and our community leaders. I'm saddened that we have lost focus on our core business, which is taking care of the 320,000 children that I have the honor to serve as their superintendent. I want to make sure that this community is clear in my intentions, which is always and will continue to be the best for our kids as we prepare to open our school year, because that remains my focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Jara. Trustee Ford, this is your item, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. 3.01 is about the conduct of Dr. Jesus Jara. This first item relates directly to the conduct of Dr. Jesus Jara concerning Assembly Bill 2 of the 2020 special session of the Nevada State Legislature and the resulting relationship between the school district, the Nevada Department of Education, the Office of the Governor, and the Nevada Legislature, and its effect on the community, including whether in the future Dr. Jara could function as an effective representative for the Clark County School District. I'd like to start the discussion by saying why I think the conversation around this item is so crucial for our community and most importantly for our students. I believe that CCSD can transform to serve every single student if we pull together and form a compelling argument to advocate for the resources that we need. What do we need to accomplish that? We know that many superintendents have advocated for more resources and improvements to policy in Carson City. It's not an easy job. We need an effective, honest, trusted leader who can lay out and sell a vision to the community, especially leaders in Carson City. Notice that I said both honest and trusted. This is especially crucial in our current crisis when we anticipate another round of budget cuts in the upcoming legislative session. And we know that 32.5% of our general operating revenues come directly from the state DSA. So you'll hear me say this a few times today, that the current crisis we are undergoing is the reason why it's urgent to have these conversations, not a reason to delay having these conversations. This item will examine whether Dr. Jara misrepresented himself and the district to the governor's office, the legislature, and the board of trustees, our 40,000 plus employees, and the community as a whole in regards to Assembly Bill 2 in the July special session. This item, the following item, will inform our decision on 3.03. So I'd like to start by walking through the timeline that's part of the backup. It's reference A. Is it possible to get that on the screen? Page 2, this is what I believe caused all of the issues that happened during the special session. So that's why I'm specifically pinpointing it, and it's extremely concerning to me. On page 2, you'll see that Jason Gowdy sends a message to Brad Keating to request a bill to take carryover funds from schools to be used centrally. There are 3 points. It says 1, here's a list of carry forward. Then it says 2, to be clear, we were not asked to identify cuts. Then on 3, it says, as I stated above, it's not fiscally responsible to allow for individual schools to carry forward monies. And then there's a blurb below it that says, if the governor could create a bill to suspend the carry forward required by NRS 388G, this would create an opportunity for the district to use these funds for the funding deficit now and in the future. Currently, we estimate we will carry forward approximately $108 million from vacancy, service level agreements, and supplies for 2020. This is a significant increase from the 2019 levels of approximately $67 million. Now, if you'll scroll down to page 3, you will see an email on that same day that was sent to the state was forwarded to us. And on page 4 is a screenshot from my personal email just to confirm that I didn't receive this. And again, only the first item is listed there. So I believe that if the entire email had been forwarded to us, all 3 items and the language requesting the bill to suspend the carry forward money, we wouldn't be in this issue in the first place.
Thank you. So I'm curious as to why 2 individual trustees were directing the superintendent to take action. I thought that was supposed to be, he was supposed to take direction from us as a board, as a collective, not from. So do individual trustees have the authority to do that?
Trustee Wright, I don't think that that's relevant right now to the topic at hand. We're discussing the superintendent's relationship with the state and the occurrences of AB2.
So can we discuss the announcement that came out today that we in the state agreed on a new collaboration having to do with distance education and reformatting? And so we're already moving forward and working with the Nevada Department of Education and working for students and the betterment of the state and education. And can we talk about that?
Trustee Wright, I'm still not sure what you're asking specifically and how this relates to AB2 and the misrepresentation of the district to the state.
Well, you said we're talking about Dr. Jara's relationship with the state. And if his relationship with the state is so damaged, why do we have a new agreement to work with the Nevada Department of Ed to put this distance learning information together is my question. Doesn't that show that this is water under the bridge? And while maybe there were missteps, he's not a politician, he's an educator. That's his training. The Nevada Department of Education has apparently put this behind them. And
can you summarize into one question, please?
Do you think any trustees contacted principals and asked them to take a vote of no confidence against the superintendent?
I don't, Trustee Wright, I don't see why this is relevant to item 3.01 about the superintendent's misrepresentation about AB2. This is about Dr. Jara's conduct.
No, because that would be actually in his evaluation.
No, his duties.
This is about his conduct. That's a performance issue.
Could we get Miriam Miller to chime in, please?
Ms. Miller, could you clarify how the superintendent's conduct is evaluated by the board, please?
I think Trustee Wright's, at least her initial question was relevant because that was on one of the emails that Trustee Ford highlighted for the board. And as the agenda item is written, its effect on the community, his ability to work with the State Department of Education and the legislature is what is at issue on this particular item. So I think you're all on the right track at this point.
Okay, I guess I would say that as late as Sunday's paper, the state superintendent expressed concerns about Superintendent Jara. So I can't speak for the state, but if I think we clearly saw the letter from the governor and the state superintendent several weeks ago, and I have since seen things that seem like they haven't changed their stance on that. So I can't speak for the state, but I don't believe that there's any reason to consider this item water under the bridge.
So it's not relevant that we announced a partnership with the Nevada Department of Education. That's not relevant at all to this?
I believe that we're going to continue working with the Nevada Department of Education no matter what, but that as it applies to the future relationships and federal funding, especially related to the next legislative session, that's where we're going to really see an impact.
So are you aware of any direct contact with principals in an effort to undermine Dr. Jara's operational decisions?
I would like another weigh-in from Mary Ann Miller, as I don't believe this relates to AB2, but if it does, I'm happy to answer.
It doesn't seem to, no.
Okay. And I'm wondering, it looks like CCA did some sort of informational write-up about they were in the room when all the discussion happened with the AB2, and they gave more information about the backstory that they were involved with. Are we going to discuss any of that? About the unemployment, about...
I don't know, Mary Miller, is that something we should be discussing right now?
If you're going to discuss what the paper says, I guess what other interested stakeholders says is also important. So it's up to you guys how you want to frame it.
Like clarification. I don't know what the question is. Could it be I'm really not sure what we're looking for.
Can some of us weigh in? It seems like we're off topic. We're supposed to be talking about AB2 and the
AB2, the teachers union was in the room and then in negotiations for that. So if they were part of the discussion and they're giving information on the negotiations for the AB2, then I think that that's relevant to the AB2 discussion.
I don't believe I included anything about the teachers union in my reference materials.
That has actually been added, and that's item Q if you'd like to look it up.
Yeah, could we bring that? Could we bring that reference up, please?
Yeah. Cindy?
Once again, happy to answer if I have the information regarding AB2 and the special session and Jara's conduct during, but I don't believe this is supposed to prove whether or not certain letters are accurate or not. So feel free to word a question to me, but I believe Mary Ann Miller will need your help here.
Ms. Miller said it was an okay line of questioning.
I think if you're concerned about what happened around AB2, somebody that was in the room has relevant information. You're not obligated to take it as, gold or anything, but you can consider that. On item Q, it doesn't look like the reference to Trustee Ford is appropriate, just the references to the AB2.
And I guess I'm just not sure how I'm supposed to answer if it's true or relevant because I wasn't there. So, I guess we could talk about it since it's an item, but I don't know why I would have the answers to any of these questions regarding CCEA or their involvement with AB2, because everything I put in my reference materials.
So can I ask if there's a reason why the email that was informing us earlier on about that this was a legislative priority about talking to the state and stuff about this money, why that was left out?
Oh, and I included that. That's in the, I believe it might be G. I included that email. And I guess the way I worded it to somebody else is that, yeah, we knew that this might happen, or we knew that, certain people were interested in that money, but it's like if I catch someone trying to steal my car, but they don't steal my car, and I call the police, it's like, oh, well, they told you they liked your car. They were interested in your car. That doesn't mean anything. As far as I understand, the board wasn't informed about this as an actual possibility and didn't weigh in on the decision to formally request a bill on the topic. So regarding that reference material F, that's really where I'm staying with, and whether or not people were interested in taking that money or moving that money is not something I know.
Trustee,
Go ahead.
can we go to
Yeah.
Trustee Garvey, and then you can put yourself back in the queue?
That's fine.
Okay, Trustee Garvey, and then Trustee Cavazos. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I want to circle back just a little bit to the emails that have two trustees directing the superintendent to do something as far as testifying about AB2. That does concern me. We are a board. We function as a board. It is not within the purview of individual trustees to direct the superintendent to do anything. So that is of concern to me. Also, the letter from CCEA gives me pause too, because of their knowledge, because I wasn't in the room either, but communication from the superintendent aligns with what they say in that letter, with individuals contacting us and trying to find money to solve the problem, which is what happens every time we have a budget crisis in this state. Legislators start looking under rocks, the governor starts looking under rocks, all kinds of things. And unfortunately, this state has a history of going to education and pulling back money to fix the holes for the entire state. I guess I would ask Trustee Ford why she does not believe that that is a possibility. I was informed that legislators were asking about the carryover. I have concerns myself why carryover is escalating year after year and not being spent, because it sure doesn't seem like money is following the child when it's being held in a piggy bank and not being used on children. And especially when we have 22 teachers with evaluations that say they are decent teachers not being able to find a spot because principals refuse to hire. So I guess my question to Trustee Ford is, why is there such credence in all of those other documents, but the one piece that says it originated from the state to ask, how can we fill this budget hole? What would you suggest is such a stretch?
Okay, thank you. In the emails, and I believe this timeline there, that was included. It was included that, let me find it really quick. It was included that we had sent to, I believe it was Michelle White, that we were interested in that. That was an item of interest. So of course, no doubt. The whole thing with this is not whether or not people have wanted this money. It's not whether or not we're doing the right thing with it, or if we should change it, or it's nothing to do with that. It's the misrepresentation of who came up with the bill. Even if, based on that email, if the state had come up with the bill, that would be one thing, but they didn't. They were just...
I'm not sure that we're 100% sure of that. As you say, neither you or I were in that room. But we do have individuals saying that certain things were proposed by the state. And I have to say, this wouldn't be the first time that the governor has infused himself into collective bargaining between the district and different groups, i.e. in this particular case, it would be the support staff and that as it relates to the unemployment piece. But for me, that makes me have enough of a doubt that I believe what the superintendent says. I also concur with Jason Gowdy. It is ridiculous that we have over $100 million in carryover that is not being spent on our students.
Okay, let me answer those questions then. Can we get the timeline back up, Cindy?
Cindy, could you bring the timeline back up? And then Trustee Garvey, can you ask a clarifying question? And then I'm going to go to the next person in the queue because of time.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if you look at the top of page 2 and the bottom of page 1 on April 25th, it says, Government Relations Director Brad Keating sent an email to Superintendent Jesus Jara and Chief Financial Officer Jason Gowdy with a request made in August 2019 to Governor Steve Sisolak's Chief of Staff Michelle White. Keating's August email says to White, as the school district moves forward with preparing for the 2021 legislative session, we put together a list of items that are incredibly important and a priority for us. We wanted to share them with you so that we can continue to have conversations about each priority and discuss how we can move forward in addressing them. One of the priorities listed is to amend NRS 388G to adjust the amount that schools can keep and carry forward money. So I understand that these conversations have been happening. It's just that's not what the topic at hand is. At the end of the day, we have a legislature that, sent a public letter stating they've lost trust in the superintendent. And so I'm wondering, based on this and based on the fact that CCSD clearly did request the bill and hide it from trustees by erasing it from our emails, are we going to have the confidence and the trust in the superintendent to continue forward as a leader, especially in a time that's as critical as this, especially in a time where trust is important, when lives are at stake, and when we're looking at the biggest budget deficit we've ever faced? And what do we have the ability to support the current superintendent in going and speaking on behalf of us at the next legislative session? Yes or no? That's all we're talking about right now. This isn't a trial. It's just, are we going to be able to do those things or not?
Well, and that specific piece that you said is talking about a conversation about limiting how much carryover can happen. When we go from 67 million to 103 million in 1 year in carryover, that is not reaching our children every single year that they are in school and being served, that's concerning to me too. And I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with trusting that our fellow board members are going to honor this. And so I guess I have to ask you, I don't understand how it has come to my attention that possibly you had a male person enter our garage to try and deliver the letter of this notice meeting to the superintendent within the executive garage. And is that true or not?
Trustee Garvey, do you want to be put back in the queue after this? That's going to be your final question. If you would like to answer it, Trustee Ford, you can. I don't know that it's relevant to AB2. It is relevant to the time leading up to this meeting.
What I want to do is make sure that I don't say anything that's going to impact this meeting and be out of order. So while I think you all know that I'm happy to explain myself most of the time, I don't believe it's good.
Trustees, I think we need to stay to the topic and keep this discussion about how we're moving forward with your relationship with the state and the legislature and the Department of Education.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. We appreciate it. Trustee Garvey, if you want to be added to the queue, you can put yourself back in the queue. Trustee Cavazos and then Trustee Young.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, brought up by Trustee Wright, we weren't in the room, and that CCEA was in the room. It is of great concern to me that instead of our superintendent or somebody that was a representative presenting, we had John Vellardita, the executive director of the Clark County Educators Association, being the one who was in the room and presenting. So that is a great concern to me. So as long as that was brought up, I want to put that out there. And I will cede my time to the next trustee. Thank you.
Trustee Cavazos, can I just ask you a question? Do we normally poll principals about any legislation that's proposed, or is this something that you just asked to do for this one time?
Actually, I did not ask about a poll. I just asked if they had been notified, because as had been happened in the past, in numerous instances, including the dean situation, Superintendent Jara had very generously stated that he would try very much that all decisions that involved them and that directly impacted them and their schools, that they would be notified. I was simply trying to get the information whether this was the same small group of principals or whether the principals had been notified. In the proposed testimony, as long as you ask, he states that he would be working with all the building principals to come up with a collective solution that works for all 320,000 students. That was the very last line of the proposed testimony. But as of the date of the testimony, the principals had not been notified.
So wasn't part of his testimony was that he was going to let them keep their carryover funds and he was going to work with them to address how to do budget cuts? I thought that was what his testimony was.
I believe you're correct at the outside, Trustee Brooks. I believe that is correct. That, but it was in favor of, and then opposed. Then it went to neutral, and then I think it went back to. I'm sorry. I would have to go back and look at a lot of notes. I'm just looking at the proposed testimony in support of, and then I was told in a phone call they would be opposing, and then again I was notified that it would be neutral. So I'm afraid that I'm not the one that can answer that adequately. I'm sorry.
I recall from having watched his testimony. Trustee Young?
Okay, thank you all for, here we go again. And I say this respectfully, please. And I'm always happy to have an opportunity for us to clarify in terms of communication. But this is a major problem, folks. We don't get the communication. That's why we're here, is because it fumbles all around. We don't get the communication, or gets part of it, or he said, and then she said, and then they go to the session. All it has to do is be put on an agenda, put it at a board meeting, explain it, get it out. But this continues to happen over and over and over again. Then I got trustees trying to grill Danielle for, well, why were you there? Did you go into the garage? I mean, that's irrelevant. Let's get to the point. Did we get a proper communication for AB2? I didn't, but then I'm always feeling left out. And President Brooks, oh, you say come to you? Hey, you don't follow enough of the leadership to let us know it's comfortable to come to you. But I'm not going to get into that. My concern is communication. It doesn't happen. It's frustrating. Okay, if we get communication, did we make sure everybody understands? Did we understand? I didn't. Did we get to a point where we could have a conversation? Where did it drop off? Did we get to a point where we could get consensus as trustees? Did that happen? No. And then did we get to a point of collaboration? No. So my concern is we're back to square one, which we talked about from the beginning a year ago. And it's still happening over and over and over. And that's why we're at this point today. So you can go to and start talking about what she did and he did, and then they said, and then this one didn't say, and it all goes back to a point of communication with a logical process so that we all know what's happening. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Same. And I'm just saying to all of you, let's stay on topic. What we need to be ticked off is about why did this happen in the first place, and why are we here? And I'm sorry, I'm just still frustrated with this. It keeps going on and on and on. And some of you know, through the process, superintendent and I quit speaking to each other because he felt that he needed to have a witness for me. If anybody's open about communication, it's probably me. I'm always open. But we keep missing the point. Superintendent did not do his job. He was to communicate with us. He was to let us know and make sure, and the board president put it on the agenda. That's my concern. And anything else I don't think is appropriate. Sorry,
Thank you.
I'm done.
Thank you, Trustee Young. Trustee Ford?
Thank you. I have some questions for Superintendent Jara.
Ms. Miller, this is a board item and it's not a disciplinary hearing. Is Superintendent Jara required to answer the questions?
He's not required to answer the questions, but Trustee Ford can say what her questions are, and if other trustees have questions, he can make a responsive statement after he hears all the questions.
All right, Trustee Ford.
Thank you. I'm still looking for clarity. So Dr. Jara, emails between you and your staff from April, May, and June indicate that you and your staff first initiated the idea of changing AB 469 to take school carryover dollars. Yet you have repeatedly stated that Assemblywoman Carlton, Speaker Frierson, and Superintendent Ebert first requested information about school carryover money from you. So can you please clarify, are you stating that Assemblywoman Carlton, Speaker Frierson, and Superintendent Ebert originally came up with the idea for AB2? Yes or no?
Madam President?
Superintendent Jara?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a brief comment, a statement. I believe Mr. Keating, our Director of Government Relations, sent a timeline to the board, I believe this afternoon. And we can certainly add that for the record. It goes back to May 21, 2019, when we discussed carry forward and all the way to July 9th. And I think that the board has received the timeline that really states the entire process.
So is that yes? I'm sorry. Is that yes or no? Did either Assemblywoman Carlton, Speaker Frierson, or Superintendent Ebert come up with the idea for AB2?
Superintendent Jara, did you have anything to add to your response?
Madam President, members of the board, I think it's been clear on the timeline that we sent to the board. That goes back to May 21, 19, the email communication that started actually when the regular session all the way to July 9th, and it outlines the entire process.
Thank you.
If it answers that question as to who specifically came up with AB2, maybe we could get it on the screen and Superintendent Jara can point out to me where it answers that.
Trustee Ford, that is the answer that Superintendent Jara would like to give you at this moment. Do you have another question?
I guess he doesn't have to answer, but can we get that timeline on the screen? We can take a minute if it takes some time to find it.
Sure. Cindy Crone, could you bring up the timeline? Trustee Cepeda?
Thank you. I guess first initial thoughts are, if the state legislature needs a compelling argument for funding education, then God help us all, but perhaps we need a otherworldly intervention because year after year we keep getting cuts. I guess it's hard for me to think about termination over just this one motion, this one item. And I guess those are my thoughts for now. I'll go ahead and cease my time.
Thank you, Trustee Cepeda. Trustee Ford, and then Trustee Young, you can close us out, and then we're going to move on. So please, no one else put yourself in the queue.
Thank you. I believe that we were able to get that timeline sent to Cindy because I feel like my questions from earlier were still not answered. So do we have it yet, Cindy? Are we able to put that up on the screen? Thank you. So back to my original question for Superintendent Jara. Can you please explain where it says, or where it clarifies who was the original author of the bill? Or who came up with the idea for it?
Trustee Ford, is that the question that you answered previously and he referred you to the timeline?
Yes, now this is the timeline.
Superintendent Jara, do you have anything to add to your original answer?
As the author, Madam President, members of the board, as the author of the bill, we never saw the bill authored. I don't have the authority as superintendent of Clark County School District to add any proclamations to special session, or we never saw the bill AB2 written either. So I can't answer as to who authored the bill.
The original one was who came up with the idea to add AB2 onto the special session?
I think that's highlighted in the timeline.
Can you point out where?
Trustee Fordy's answered your question in the manner that he would like to answer your question. Do you have a different question?
Yeah, governor could create a bill to suspend the carry forward required by NRS 388G. This would create an opportunity for the district to use these funds for the funding deficit now and in the future. Currently, we estimate we will carry forward approximately $108 million from vacancy, service level agreements, and supplies for 2020. This is a significant increase from the 2019 levels of approximately $67 million. Now, if we could please scroll down to the next page. That one that I just read was sent at 10 o'clock. This one was sent at 10:12. Elizabeth, Dr. Jara asked me to forward you this attachment and information below regarding the attachment from Jason Gowdy. Dr. Jara would like us to send this to the trustees as soon as possible. Let me or Jason know if you need anything from either of us. So you can see what was requested to be sent to the board from Jara. Now you can scroll down to page 4, please, and you can see that we all received this email on May 22nd. Trustees, I wanted to share with you the spreadsheet that we are sending to Speaker Frierson and Assemblywoman Carlton this afternoon. Speaker Frierson is inquiring about the carry forward dollars in schools. There is information that principals are sharing with their SOTs. Brad will be sending the spreadsheet later this afternoon. Let me know if you have any questions. And then you can see that what was sent to us was item 1 and a spreadsheet that only listed the school's carryover that was also included in reference material during the end of year budget. So for me to read this, when I read this, it made me think, okay, the state is interested to know how much money total our schools are carrying forward. That seems kind of normal. And we provided them with that information. That's good. But the part that I have a huge problem with is that it was misrepresented to us and we had no idea that what we actually sent was request for a bill. So, you know, the email informs us that the spreadsheet was sent, but nowhere is it mentioned at all that the email was edited before being forwarded to us. And what we were receiving was only a small portion of what we sent to the state, which included the request for AB2 to be added to the special session. So the information that was removed, I believe, was critical information for the board to have. So my question for Superintendent Jara is if you think this is okay to do.
To clarify your question, is what okay to do?
Is it okay to modify an email that was sent to the state, crop out 3/4 of it, and forward to the trustees with the assumption that this was the entirety that was forwarded to the state? Is that okay?
Can I ask, is it typical that trustees receive an email that has every single chain response on it from every employee? Would that be?
I would say, does Superintendent Jara see any problem with this having been done the way that this was done?
Again, this is not a disciplinary hearing, but if
no, I'm not.
Superintendent Jara would like to chime in on that question. Superintendent Jara, are you good? Or if so,
I'm muted. Okay. I'm sorry. Let me just answer the question because there is no doctoring up of emails. We forwarded the information that was necessary for the board per the email that I wrote there. And Brad will be sending the spreadsheet as highlighted there. So there is no doctoring of emails or communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Jara.
Okay, well, clearly a large portion was removed before sending to us. I guess then my next question is just, is this common practice? Does this happen all the time to where we're not receiving information and there isn't any other note associated saying this is only the portion that I believe is important for the board to receive?
Trustee Ford, it's my assumption that we probably wouldn't receive a long thread of responses between staff. We would just receive what's pertinent. I feel you feel that there was some pertinent information that was not included, but I would say there are probably lots of emails that staff email back and forth that trustees don't receive.
I wouldn't say that there was information that wasn't included. I would say there was information that I felt was pertinent that was actually removed before forwarding to us. So I do get that we don't need to have all information, but this isn't about, and yes, this is not about Dr. Jara's job. It's more about how confident we feel that we're getting the truth. And do we feel like we're able to continue forward? I mean, I certainly don't feel comfortable knowing that important information regarding legislative bills and the way that we handle our school carryover money to the tune of $112 million will be removed from an email to me that was sent to the state. That, in my opinion, this was the base of all the problems that occurred. So in trying to make sure that, we have a superintendent that we can trust, I want to know how often this happens. And if we do feel like this is something that's okay to do, and if so, then I do have a problem with that. I think that we're publicly elected to represent our constituents. They expect that we have all of the information possible, and they certainly would not appreciate that we don't know what bills are being requested to the state and how money is going to be shifted. So this is a huge issue for me, and I will. I'll regress. Go ahead.
Thank you, Trustee Ford. So Ms. Miller would like us to note discussion should be about AB2, not miscommunication in general. Trustee Young, I'm going to let you close us out, and then we're going to move on to the next item. Trustee Young?
Okay. I don't understand what Ms. Miller is saying or recommending that it's about AB2 when AB2 is a big flaw is communication. I don't get that.
See, allow me to clarify then.
Yeah, I don't get that because that's why we're here. That's why we're
not here about communication in general. That would be on his performance evaluation. You're here about a specific allegation of miscommunication regarding AB2 on this item.
But that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
The discussion went to how he communicates in general, and that's a performance evaluation item.
Okay, well, my concern is we wouldn't be here, quite frankly, and I know I'm repeating myself, if we all just followed the proper protocol of letting trustees know. But I'm just feeling like I'm not comfortable moving forward because I don't feel we've ever gotten the real straight. What happened? Can we just say what it was? Who did what? Send flowers to somebody, apologize, and then move on. But we haven't gotten there. We keep going back and forth. And I still haven't gotten the straight of just go to the timelines. Did it originate? I mean, it's a simple question. I mean, we could be done. Did it originate with the district? Was this a thought? Was it Joan Ebert issue? Was it the governor? And if it was the governor, who did we speak to in the governor's office? And if it's with trustees, where did we fall down? That's all. I want to remind trustees the oath of office we took when we ran for school board trustee. And I'm just going to read it real quick. We put our name here, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution and government of the United States and the Constitution and government of the state of Nevada against all enemies, whether domestic or foreign, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance and loyalty to the same, any ordinance, resolution, or law of any state notwithstanding, and that I will well and faithfully perform all the duties of the office of School Board Trustee, Clark County School District, of which I'm about to enter, and then if the oath is help me God or affirm, listen to this, trustees, under the pains and penalties of perjury. We are under laws. And if we give that authority to anyone, we have lots of things we say, this person will act in the authority of the board. This person will represent the board. We have that because we can't be everywhere. And if there is the pain of perjury to who we give the authority to, trustees, we're all accountable. That's what we took the oath for. And it's legal.
So at this point, Jara is not answering any questions. Garvey is questioning me about unrelated details. This is not good. This plan looks like a failure. If we don't have Garvey's vote with this, I doubt that she will switch it up during the next item about the reopening plans. But at least there's still plan B of having a documented vote on the record where half the board wants to fire Jara. There's still that, at least. So now we go through the item that Linda leads. with the intent to put on the record that Jara had misrepresented the state's plan for us. We already figured out that plan was just told to him and the rest of Jara's soup group by the big boss. So we say our concerns about Jara essentially lying about the plan to us. Here's a clip of that.
I'm going to turn this over to Trustee Cavazos.
What I am presenting is that our community, our teachers, our parents who had been waiting so patiently, they had been told that we needed to have all these meetings 6 to 8 hours at a time. We could have received approval and not had a false deadline given to us, which is at first July 13th. When I pushed on it about the 20 days before school starting, then I was told, okay, well, it's July 21st. And we did have the meeting July 21st, but all of this time, we could have put something together, and the only ones that were going to be responsible for this were going to be the board and the superintendent. So this is why I am presenting this today, because I do not feel that we were given the correct information. And I find it hard to believe, with the very competent staff that Dr. Jara has, with very good minds on his team, that not one person would have known what the actual reopening plan was.
I felt very much misled by this, and I was a little bit upset, quite frankly. And I said, doggone it, I got caught again. I'm believing what people tell me, and I need to maybe do my own checking around to make sure I have the information correctly, so that I can, when I talk to my constituents, I can tell them exactly what I know. And that's where I felt really, quite frankly, manipulated and disrespected. And my community, as you know, I'm very definitive. I'm like a little mama, like a mama bear, little mama black bear wearing a hat, who really fights for all the equity issues and makes sure that the people who do not have computer and technology access will get information.
So we did it. We put our concerns on the record. A couple trustees are going to weigh in on this, and then it will be time to close this item and go to the third item, the main event that we're all waiting for. Everyone's tuned in for. Everyone's waiting to watch how that vote goes down. It's the culmination of many levels of effort, and a lot of people are hopeful. And we're almost there. Everyone's watching. Are you watching or listening? Here we go. Here we go. It's our big moment. It's our big moment. Are you ready? Here we go. Here we go.
If there are issues with the superintendent, those need to be brought up during his evaluation process. This was, I think, an end run around that. And it is clear that Superintendent Jara is not a politician, that he's an educator. And I think that we should have more open conversations regarding our legislative platforms and where we want to go in the future. And with that said, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Trustee Wright. Can I get Ms. Miller to clarify that we are allowed to entertain that motion?
Actually, pursuant to your rules on in your appendix, a motion to adjourn takes precedent over any other motions.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Looking for a second for that motion.
I'll second the motion. Chris Garvey.
Thank you. Okay, trustees, there are some more people in the queue, Ms. Miller. Am I supposed to call on them or call for the vote?
You call for the discussion.
Under your rules on page 1 of 2 in your appendix, the motion is not debatable.
Okay. Okay, so trustees, I have a motion by Trustee Wright and a second by Trustee Garvey for adjournment. All of those in favor, please cast your votes by saying.
Before you do that, I'm sorry, I may be out of order, please. And it may not be the proper process, but I have some questions.
I'm sorry, but Ms. Miller has clarified.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't agree with Ms. Miller.
Okay, that is the rule that we are being given by board counsel. So I'm sorry, but I have to call for a vote now. So trustees in favor of adjournment, please cast your vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Please cast your vote by saying nay.
I oppose.
Okay.
I oppose
Okay.
with a protest. I oppose with the protest.
All right. Trustee Young, Trustee Cavazos, and Trustee Ford are opposed. Was there
I
anybody
am
else?
opposed, Madam President, and I am disheartened and shocked that this was an unbelievably calculated move to limit discussion and to not allow the last agenda item to be even discussed.
I support Trustee Cavazos. You are destroying, no, you destroying this trustee. No, you set this up.
Trustees.
Awful.
Trustees, please listen to legal counsel
Legal counsel does not support the right things.
Okay.
That's cool.
All right.
We'll just
So again,
do another
do we
meeting
have
very
any
soon.
other opposed besides Trustee Young, Trustee Cavazos, and Trustee Ford? No. So that motion carries.
What you will have is another setup. You are splitting the board and you're splitting the school district.
Please. That motion carries 4-3, noting that Trustee Young and Trustee Cavazos and Trustee Ford are opposed. And this meeting is now adjourned at 3:55.
Thank you for proving our point. Good day.
You did a great job of making sure everybody in the community knows that this board does not.
I worked with Mary Miller.
And then it's over, and the meeting ended, and never opened that item. And I'm my God, holy. I'm still not fucking over it. Why did I say good day? I don't know why I said that. My brain just was like, say good day. And then I did. I should have been like, you fucking see you next Tuesdays right now. That's what I should have said. So at this point, we had lost the Post Battle of AB2. Me and the Lindas had been blindsided. It was almost as though the other side knew our battle plan. Jara somehow made it through the Post Battle of AB2. Shielded by his soldiers, he was able to dodge all the bullets and he successfully avoided capture. Now, I've said before how disappointing it is to realize how many people would rather be on the winning side than the right side. Once everyone witnessed Jara win against the Board of Trustees, whom they elected to be their voice and protect the district, Jara's numbers and influence grew. So over the next few weeks or whatever, Jara just, made a lot of friends. Everybody was like ready to try to be okay with him or whatever. And I'm just counting the people that are now on his side that I know hate him. They despise him. And they've all told me this confidentially, but they don't tell each other. Okay, so they're all working with Jara, hating Jara, and there are all these like secrets. There were enough people that if everybody who was involved with or watching from the sidelines had not retreated after we lost the Post Battle of AB2 and instead had said, fuck that, we just saw what those bitches did, not in our district, not in our district. What and when is the next battle? Where's the post battle? I'm in. If anyone had done that, we could have doubled down right away. Okay, I don't blame anybody for doing that. It's like a normal human response to disappointment and loss and the urge to just want to stop fighting and be on the side that's not taking the punches is valid. But the best thing to do when an underdog or a David loses a battle against a Goliath is for more people to jump in against the Goliath, because even though they won, that's when the Goliath is the most vulnerable. And they don't have the people power to keep swapping more fighters in like the Davids do. All right, I mentioned earlier that I was in therapy for very specific reasons. And I say it like that because it's always a good idea to be in therapy, even if everything's chill, even if there's not something going on that you need to address. But there were things that I was like working to address. And my weekly therapy sessions had turned into dealing with the board and Jara during a pandemic, which was necessary for me to deal with. So that I had to add in a second weekly session so that I could commit one of my therapy sessions to my stuff and one to school board stuff. And that might sound kind of extra, but I guarantee you that I am not the first person who has been sent to a therapist chair by CCSD. Anyway, so I'm in therapy. I'm explaining about the Battle of AB2 and I'm all so upset and I'm telling how I posted this and I posted that on my Facebook and then I got into it with Jara on Twitter and my therapist suggests like maybe I don't just first go straight to social media to deal with my feelings when I'm Jara-raging. And instead, I put that energy into maybe some sort of creative pursuit, since I like making art and crafting. Is there some way I could like put my feelings about the superintendent into a creative project? I'm like, what, like cross stitch? She goes, yeah, I think that's a great idea. So I tell her I'll give it a shot, and then I did. And you know what? It actually did make me feel a little better. So after that horrific experience that me and the Lindas went through virtually, but holy shit. We conferred and we requested a Zoom call with our attorney, Mary Ann Miller. We were pissed. Okay. We each told her why we had individually lost confidence in her. We do not trust her and we do not feel comfortable with her as our board counsel anymore. We said we understand that it would take a majority of the board to choose to seek new counsel, and we know that we don't have that. So we wanted to speak to you directly, Mary Ann, and let you know that nearly half of the board does not want you as our attorney anymore. And we want to know whether or not you feel that you can ethically continue in this role, knowing that 3 of us do not want you as our attorney. I told her you did not help at all when I told you that I had knowledge of Jara using CCSD funds to tamper with school board elections. You did not do anything when Jara abruptly removed me from the committees that I was serving on as punishment, and then sent an email to all staff and members of the teacher recruitment and retention and communication committees telling them that I'd been removed. My work is in communications. His email could appear as though I did something wrong, cause people not to want to work with me in the future, and affect my livelihood. By allowing Lola to refuse to serve Jara for the special meeting, you put me in a position where I had to have him served at home, and then you just sat there while the trustees attempted to question me about that, to which I did not respond based on your advice, which you gave me to ensure a peaceful meeting. We asked you over and over if there's any other card possible that the trustees could pull to derail the meeting and the item about Jara's employment, and you said that there was nothing else you could think of, but then you advised Deanna Wright about a special rule for small boards that's buried in the appendix of our governance policies and hasn't been reviewed in years. You informed her exactly how to end the meeting before the item to terminate Jara began. And you had promised us that you were doing everything to prevent any disruptions and help repair the image the public has of the Board of Trustees being a disaster. And she responds, well, Deanna called me after we spoke asking how can she disrupt this item? And well, I can't advise some of you and then not advise others. And you all have attorney-client privilege. Up until now, we were like kind of as professional as possible and trying to reason with her, but we all just fucking erupted at that time. All 3 of us, me and the Lindas. In what fucking world does a board attorney support a board member in purposely being disruptive? How do you even have a license to practice law? You are a snake. A snake. That was Trustee Young. I say, you've called me in for meetings to address my disruptive behavior 6 times. You had no fucking problem telling me all the legal ramifications that I might have for acting in a manner that appears to be against the board. You are full of shit. You are a hypocrite. I do not like you. That's what I said to her. Oh, and then in all of the over-talking, while trying to defend herself, she's talking, and then she mentions that when she spoke to Jara, she didn't get the impression, and then we cut her off. What? That was Linda Cavazos. What? You spoke to Jara? When? What impression you spoke to Jara? She says the day before the meeting. He called her with some basic procedural questions, basic questions like, do I have to answer questions during the meeting that individual board members ask me, or can I decline to comment? Yeah, so she let him know that he doesn't really have to unless a majority of the board says he has to. So she's advising the superintendent, whom she doesn't work for, in how to ignore and disrespect the board members whom she does work for and who are his boss. Holy fuck. Okay. She is aware of multiple disruptions planned for the meeting, which we conferred with her for hours on, and we had her verbalize to us, recorded, that she will do her best to supporting us in a disruption-free meeting. She knew exactly what was about to go down, how Jara will not have to answer for deceiving her own clients. She knew how bad the board will look to state officials and the public, and how much trust and hope is about to be lost in the district. Enough for the state to begin taking action to appoint board members to the CCSD school board. She sits behind her laptop knowing exactly what chaos is about to unfold this entire meeting. She sits there quietly, waiting for it to happen, and then she watches it happen. Okay, now I want to tell you one thing about COVID ties, okay? We're going to go way more into this, but this is something that everyone should know happened, okay? In the future, I will tell the full story of this stuff and I will provide lots of receipts. But the quick version is that around the same time, right after this meeting ended, John Vellardita, through CCEA, saw an opportunity for a money grab of grant funding that was earmarked for COVID swab kits. I heard from a very credible source that what happened is he was involved in purchasing mounds of test kits. And that was when everything was shut down temporarily, and it was only going to be like a few weeks before everything opened up again. No one knew it was going to be a year at that point. Again, I'm not going to say for sure it's true, but I think it's true. And it sounds like a pretty good reason to do the next thing that he did. So once we had all processed that we'd be doing distance learning for an unforeseen amount of time, CCEA formed ties, and John Vellardita wanted all educators back in the buildings, even though students were not going to be physically there. That was his demand. He wanted all educators in the building, even though having all educators online at the same time creates bandwidth issues, even though many teachers had better setups at their home. Oh, and there's also a raging pandemic happening. And so yes, there were some teachers who preferred to be back in the buildings. They couldn't really teach at home. That's fine. He wanted all teachers, every single teacher, and he got it, every single teacher back in the buildings, because he needed human mules to run the test kits through that he had hoarded and was now afraid he would have lost all that money. The district's going to buy the test kits back from him, by the way. Every single time someone shoves a swab up your brain, John Vellardita gets a few dollars, okay? Some of the trustees, me and the Lindas, were sending questions about it to CCSD's attorneys, attaching info about ties, trying to find out who had been hired for these positions, who's getting paid, what is happening. Then we asked those questions during a board meeting, and a couple of days later received a cease and desist letter from CCEA. He's claiming that we're bargaining and negotiating with the other teachers union, when in reality we're just talking to teachers to see what's happening, what their life is like, how they're educating. Do they want to go back to school buildings? We're doing our damn jobs. And he's sending us cease and desist letters from talking to any teachers at all about anything happening with COVID or anything. I can't even think right now. I'm so angry I can't even think anymore. Now I'll share with you something that happened in the same meeting. Lola's refusing to put slides on the screen that I had sent in earlier because she's trying to protect this stupid ass plan that Jara's soup group put together. I sent in reference material showing plans that other districts are doing that aren't the same model. She won't put it on, so I just held up my iPad and showed it. And that's just a little teaser of what is a few episodes away. And if you have followed the show this far, then you will not be too surprised to learn that Jara's soup group, what happened is they found a way to profit off of taxpayers by all using the same stupid ABC model that their think tanks devised, and then they formed shell companies in different states to sell all the things that their school districts would need to support this particular model that was devised by a bunch of business people over a weekend, probably in Florida. Then, of course, all these superintendents tell all their boards that this is what all the other large districts are doing, when in actuality, it's only districts with Chiefs for Change superintendents that are using this model. And there were lots of other options that ended up being way more successful than that ABC hybrid plan, like San Diego and Fresno Unified. But we can't do any of those things because the big bosses do not get richer from them, and they are going to make money, even if that means that our community and our children suffer. And now I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a break really quick. I'm going to go practice my stress management techniques. I'm going to go for a quick walk. I'm going to ground myself. I'm going to do my deep breaths. I'm going to scream into the abyss. You guys sit tight and I will be back in a bit, or maybe I won't. Maybe I will keep walking. Maybe I will disappear from society, dig a well, live off the land. It could really go either way. Hey guys, I'm back. Was that last part as painful for you as it was for me? Okay, I made a green juice. Now, where were we? So we left off after the Post Battle of AB2 ended. Me and the Lindas lost. Our attorney betrayed us. Anyone that had even a morsel of faith left in the school board before this meeting began no longer did. Everyone collectively threw their hands up and said, "This board is out of control. We give up." But you got to keep on trucking. Now, because the board was such a dumpster fire, it actually gave us leverage to